Warning, this fic contains many dark and adult themes. For the full list provided by the author, please check the description below and proceed with caution. Welcome back, this is Falling for You by 1967 Hogwarts Goddess, a Percy Jackson fanfic. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy and subscribe for future stories. Please check the description for a full list of tags and the link to drop a kudos for the original author. With that out of the way, let's get started. Chapter 63. Percy XL. A pin dropping could be heard on the battlefield. What felt like hundreds of wide eyes bored into Percy, from the monsters standing paralyzed in the trees in shock, to the half-buried demigod army frozen and staring. He tilted his head back and breathed out slowly, trying to calm his thundering pulse. Adrenaline still flooded through him. He flicked Gaia's ichor off of Adamas before sheathing it again, and his gaze settled on Annabeth, shakily getting to her feet. They grinned at each other. She moved towards him, picking up speed as she got closer. She limped and he pulled a face. "Annabeth," he said apologetically, stepping over the watery platform Gaia's severed head floated on to make his way to her, his voice echoing, "Annabeth, I'm so s." "Shut up," Annabeth met him in the middle, yanking him into a hug that almost winded him. Instantly, he felt his body relax. He smiled wearily, threading his bloody fingers through her hair. "Sorry, Annabeth," he winced and kissing the top of her head. The hurricane had drained him, worse than the one he had conjured to fight Hyperion the year before. If he wasn't careful, he'd probably end up falling asleep on Annabeth's shoulder, though that didn't sound too bad. "I told you I didn't want to do it, but really he started again, but Annabeth quite literally stepped on his foot, a move he suspected to be deliberate. "Percy, if you apologize again, I'll slap you again," she warned him. "It was part of the plan, my plan." "A good plan," he murmured with eyebrows raised. "Told you so," she said smugly, but her eyes softened a little in guilt. "I am sorry I hit you so hard though, I didn't mean to." She lifted her hand and pressed it to the still hot outline on his cheek. Her skin was cool and soothing, and Percy screwed up his face at her. "Oh, so you can apologize but I can't?" he asked her, tiredly feigning indignation. "I think I like it better the other way around," Annabeth said, and she kissed him gently. "Sounds about right," he replied after. "Not that this isn't adorable," Leo's voice called out, making the pair of them jump, "but I'm losing feeling in my legs and I kind of need them to dance on Gaia's grave." Percy swallowed and grinned sheepishly. For a moment he'd completely forgotten that anyone except him and Annabeth existed, but the half-submerged demigods were still watching them, some in awe, the older ones more in exasperation. Percy could see Chiron shaking his head with his eyes closed. The same look Paul had sometimes when telling Percy and his mother about what some trouble kids at Good had done now. "Kinda?" Piper questioned Leo, turning around as best she could in her dirt prison to raise an eyebrow. "Well, yeah, how else would you dance?" Leo said before gasping theatrically, "Break dancing." People laughed at that, and it was like a spell had broken over the field. Cheers and chants broke out, people lobbing handfuls of soil at Gaia's decapitated limbs. Hazel and Nico sent dirt flying everywhere as soon as they realized that they now had superior control over the earth, and Hazel instinctively started freeing others. Nico, however, didn't so much as make eye contact with anyone else before he blurred into a black shadow and vanished. Annabeth turned to him, her eyes fierce. The world narrowed back down to the two of them again. "It wasn't your fault and it wasn't his either," she stated boldly. Percy's face closed off instantly. "I don't blame Nico," he said flatly. He was 10 years old and didn't understand fully how or why his sister had just died. "Wouldn't you wish for someone you albeit wrongly blamed to feel the same pain?" Annabeth asked, speaking up a little louder over the groans of people pulling themselves out the ground, but still quiet enough for their conversation to remain private. "I'm not saying you deserve to feel that pain because no one does, but I'm saying that I know you at least understand wanting revenge. And everything that comes with it." Her eyes pierced him and Percy swore under his breath. "Yes, I understand," he admitted, his thoughts reshuffling. "I think I cursed people long before I was 10. Annabeth paused, "Like your stepfather." Her eyes were soft. Percy opened his mouth then closed it. "Yeah," he got out, "probably." Annabeth bit her lip. "Gaia said," she paused, trailing off slightly before lowering the volume of her voice. "She said that he was similar to Aranos." Percy knew what she was picturing. Kronos in all his blazing abusive glory, 10 times bigger and 10 times meaner, a primordial of infinite power and violence. But all Percy could picture was the smell of moldy corn chips and sweaty underarms, a nasty bruise on his temple from where he'd been shoved into a wall, and the quiet, singular memory of his mother flinching. Percy nodded tightly once, then decided to change the subject. "I don't blame Nico," he said with finality. He didn't. Holding grudges was too draining for him right now. The hard part now is actually gonna be finding him to tell him. Annabeth let the conversation switch with a barely there nod, but then narrowed her eyes at him. "And it's not your fault either," she pressed. Percy scowled, clenching his jaw. His victorious happiness over the death of Gaia faded rapidly as he remembered every little secret that had slipped out of Gaia's mouth. "It's different," he gritted his teeth. "I killed the Arai and I didn't even care about what they would do, Annabeth. I wasn't thinking and—" "Oh, so you knew that killing an Arai meant someone you loved would die?" Annabeth asked, a glint in her eye. "Annabeth. Yes or no, Jackson?" Percy restrained himself from slamming his head into the nearest tree. "No, obviously," he pushed out, "but—" "So it wasn't your fault. Looking at motives, Percy, it's nothing more than correlation, not causation." "But I did cause it," Percy burst out, feeling his eyes start to burn. "Annabeth, you died because I—" "Do I look dead?" She put her hands on her hips, then lifted one to cup his cheek. "No," a muscle in his jaw jumped, "but you were when I came back the first time." Sometimes he could still see it. The body dripping water steadily from its bloated fingertips, half covered by a sheet on the table. The curly golden hair in front of him had been lank and beige. Her tanned and toned skin had been gray. He dug his fingernails into his palms and the dead body in his mind flickered. The real Annabeth in front of him, the bloodied and bruised but warm and alive, softened her eyes, her face becoming more serious. "Percy, no one in their right mind blames you," she said. Percy couldn't stop himself from snorting. "Do I look like I'm in my right mind?" He put his hands on his hips and mirrored her. She snorted back, "When have you ever been?" Then her face fell. "Hey, where's your camp necklace?" she asked, worried and possibly doing a conversation change of her own. Percy shrugged. "I took it off, I didn't want to lose it." "You idiot, it was for luck too, just like the first time." Percy blanked at that. "What first time?" "Come again," he asked. Annabeth crossed her arms, but the corner of her mouth twitched. "The beach, off Santa Monica Pier, you were about to fight Ares and I gave you my camp necklace to wear for luck." Percy touched his neck dimly. "Oh yeah," he said, "reconciliation." "And Poseidon together," she finished. Percy smiled at her. "You had it so bad." "Bite me, you got lucky, didn't you?" He conceded, nodding. "Might have to go put it back on soon," he said. "I think I'm going to need an extra bit of luck with the gods after all this." He really wasn't sure what they'd do. He remembered the winter solstice. If Gaia was right and a small, not entirely gone voice whispered in the back of his mind that she'd never not been, then the gods knew about everything he'd done. They knew he was the godkiller in the pit. They'd thought he was too dangerous to stay alive before. What did they think now? Combined with everything he just said, it didn't paint a good picture, faking or not. Percy chewed his lip. He didn't want to think about whether some of his words had accidentally been sincere. But he had just scattered Gaia, he thought, glancing at the strewn and floating limbs. He wasn't quite ready to let them drop just yet for fear of her reassembling like some possessed Mrs. Potato Head. Surely that counted at least a little bit in his favor. A spiky feeling stirred in his chest, not unfamiliar. He shouldn't have to prove why he shouldn't be smited. A heavy clap on the back startled him, and it was only by sheer control that Percy didn't decapitate Clarice. "You too," the daughter of Ares shouted. "I should have known. Nearly had us all going there for a minute, you little punks." The newly freed demigods behind her cheered, the rest of the seven pushing their way to the front of the crowd, grinning at them madly. Percy returned the smiles, but they felt off somehow. Percy swallowed uneasily. Why did he feel weird? Had he not done the right thing? Had he? He took Annabeth's hand and the stirring feeling faded. Gaia was dead. He'd wanted her dead for too long, and he'd not only killed her but she had suffered too, just as he'd promised. He rubbed his index finger and thumb together, feeling the hot ichor that had flooded down his sword and over his fingers. No, Gaia meant no apocalypse. No one he knew had died, though he still averted his eyes from the few bodies on the battlefield that hadn't turned to dust once struck, covered head to toe in capes of centurions or silver jackets. But overall, a solid victory, right? Right. The chattering and hearty shoves around them faltered, and Percy looked up as he heard telltale metallic notes as swords were brought back out, glares leveled at the remaining monsters in the tree line. Ogres and Dracena not cut down hissed at them, others being braver and even hesitantly approaching them. Yeah, Leo banged his hammer against Jason's shield, the other boy smiling bemusedly at him. Really? Gaia's a DIY Jenga set over there, but you want some more. Percy was too done for another fight. He counted them in his head, there weren't that many. His fingers twitched as the vague feelings of all their separate bodies built up, a handful of pulses that weren't his own dimly echoing in his ears. With a wave of his hand, the group of monsters dissolved into gold, drifting silently through the breeze. There were no explosions this time, and Percy found that he actually preferred it that way. It was more peaceful, but demigods around them blinked. Percy lowered his hand too quickly and stares flicked from the sudden piles of dust to his hand and back, looking startled. Percy shifted uncomfortably and couldn't stop the glare that eventually pushed itself out of his eyes, averting the curious looks. After an awkward second or two, Chiron joined their crowd, a wide grin splitting his face. Excellent work, all of you. Anyone injured? Pretty much everyone raised their hands, some raised a foot. Chiron nodded as if it was an everyday occurrence, which Percy remembered it kinda was. Please make your way to the med tents as soon as you can. We have much ambrosia and nectar on hand. And remember, tonight we feast. Percy had almost forgotten the celebration for a successful quest. After they had recovered Zeus' Masterbolt, he talked to his father and Zeus, then they'd had to wear laurel wreaths to a big feast prepared in their honor, and lead a procession down to the bonfire after, where they'd got to burn the burial shrouds made for them in their absence. During the winter solstice, they had attended a party on Olympus, but it had been different for the great prophecy. They'd had their big meeting with the Olympian council, done the shrouds, and had a dinner, but the celebration had been a little more muted in the face of all their dead. They hadn't lost that many this time around, however. So why was everyone so shifty, casting unsure glances over their shoulders as they walked to the med tents? Oh, it was him. They were all uneasy because of him. They'd seen him explode a giant's head, turn monsters into dust with a flick of his wrist, and chop a primordial goddess into sushi. Percy ran a hand through his hair, looking over at Gaia's remains instead and pushing those thoughts away too. He had other things to think about. Only the 7 remained with Chiron, each sensing that they still had to deal with it. They crowded around the limbs, and Percy honestly couldn't see the grassy field underfoot recovering from such a thorough trampling. What are we supposed to do? Asked Piper. Is this scattered enough? She looked a bit green, and Percy was hit with the reminder that she was a vegetarian. It should suffice. Chiron nodded at Percy with pride in his eyes, but Percy didn't feel as warmed by it as he used to. Was there something else lurking in those brown depths? He smiled tightly back, and Chiron's own smile wavered. What was wrong with him? Why didn't he feel as happy as everyone else was? Annabeth's arm slipped round his waist, and he lifted his over her shoulders instinctively. His muscles were tense and still, so everything was just going to go back to normal now. He'd done nothing in the last year except fight for his life and lay comatose under Hera's control. But now it was over. He'd be going back to high school in September. He'd come back to Camp Half-Blood the summer after, or maybe Camp Jupiter. The gods would most likely request his help with something again. That ugly feeling stirred in his chest. Demand. Gaia's really dead, he heard Hazel say in shock, and tried to pull himself back into the present. His fingers tapped against Annabeth's shoulder without thinking about it. He felt overwhelmed. It's about time, Leo grinned, elbowing Frank into a matching expression. Dirt face is no more face, and we get to party over it. Chiron smiled at the short boy. Will it be on Olympus again? Annabeth asked. I'm not sure, Chiron said. The gods do like to celebrate on Olympus, especially around the summer solstice. It will depend on what they choose. Or it'll depend on who they invite, Percy thought. He was either at the top or the bottom of their invite list, or just not on it at all. So do we get cardboard boxes or? Jason asked, gesturing at the body pieces. I will handle this, came a new but familiar voice. Hazel and Piper stepped aside to make way for a young girl with brown hair. She wore a simple cloth dress, but her eyes flickered gently with fire when she made eye contact with Percy. As she walked by, her fingertips trailed across the back of his knuckles. It felt like he was plunged into a warm bath, and he felt his brain slow down a little, his muscles unclenched slightly. The tired smile returned to his face. He pressed a kiss onto Annabeth's head on instinct. Hestia pushed through the air with her small hand, and the scattered chunks of primordial quickly burned into ash before dissipating into the air. Before they vanished, Percy saw each flake zooming in a different direction, and he somehow knew that no two bits would land within 10 miles of each other. He let the floating water slink through the grass back into the sea. "Thank you, Lady Hestia," Chiron bowed gratefully. The others copied him, their faces briefly down. Hestia locked eyes with Percy. "Thank you," he mouthed before dipping his head in respect. Hestia hadn't been on the Olympian Council in a long time. She didn't fight, she wasn't a threat to him. But for some reason, he still couldn't fully close his eyes. "I wanted to personally thank you all," Hestia spoke, and it never got less jarring to hear the wise words through the voice of a child. "It has not been an easy journey for you, but you are home now. Gaia may not ever rise again, certainly not in your lifetimes. You have done well, heroes." "Thank you, Lady Hestia," Annabeth murmured, and the others echoed her. Percy just nodded at her again, and a small smile crept onto the goddess' face, a little offset by the worry that creased her brow, pulling the same face his mother did sometimes when he came back after a quest. "The Olympians also request your presence on Olympus at once. My siblings shall reward you all well," she said firmly, her eyes catching Percy's yet again. "I will ensure it." Did that mean they weren't going to smite him? Why would that be more of a surprise than if they did? But then she was gone, and only the faint smell of logs burning lingered in the air after. Percy turned his head back towards the campfire, but there was no one tending to it. His fingers started tapping again. "I still can't believe it. You could have told us about your plan." Hazel slapped Percy on the back reproachfully, but a wide grin split her face. "Gaia was watching us all, and we really needed to sell it," Annabeth explained. "She kept trying to recruit Percy, so we thought we'd play into that. It was Percy's idea." The others turned to him in surprise. "Annabeth fine-tuned it," he protested. "It was definitely not my idea to actually fight each other." "Did it not make it convincing?" Annabeth addressed the others. They nodded. "It was scary seeing you two turn on each other," said Frank, Hazel agreeing beside him. "Couldn't fool you though," Percy said to Piper, who grinned and shook her head. "You got me for a second," she said, "but I could still feel you both being head over heels for each other. But I didn't know the full plan, and even I wasn't sure for a minute or two. Percy, you really could rival my dad for your acting." Percy swallowed and forced a smile. "Yeah," he said. "Get this man an Oscar," Leo grinned. "Annabeth, I'm afraid you'd only get Best Supporting Actress because no one else could play Boo Boo the Fool like Gaia did." Percy laughed at that. Chiron shook his head at them all. "No, but honestly, that whole bit when she touched you on the arm and neither of you spoke for a while, it was really convincing," Jason said earnestly. "Oh," Percy blinked. "How long was I out for?" he asked. Frowns met his question. "What do you mean?" asked Chiron. "I wasn't being quiet. Gaia was showing me a vision of what would happen if I joined her," Percy explained, getting a sinking feeling that it may have been better to keep quiet about it. Annabeth blinked at him in surprise. Piper screwed up her face. "What did you see?" she asked curiously. Percy shrugged a little, and Annabeth's arm tightened around his waist slightly. How could he really explain it? "It was just I had another tattoo, her blessing all down my other arm," he said, gesturing while still thinking. I think the gods were either dead or locked up, and then we were all in charge. Gaia wasn't even really there." He looked up and shrugged again. Chiron looked deep in thought. The rest of them were just either wrinkling their noses or nodding. "It felt real peaceful," Percy said before turning his head to Annabeth. "You were there," he murmured. "I'm here now too," she replied, an unknown emotion dancing in her eyes. She looked concerned at his words, and Percy didn't know what to say to that, so he kissed her on the forehead again. The worry didn't leave her gaze. And then suddenly Leo was at his side, a calloused hand patting his shoulder. "Hey, jokes aside, thanks man." The smaller boy had genuine gratefulness in his eyes. "Going off what the Mud Queen said, it was either you or me, and while I would have loved it if it was me, apparently it wasn't my story this time. So yeah, thanks for doing it when I didn't." Percy smiled. "No problem, bro," he said. "Does make me think how I would have done it though," Leo said, and the slight seriousness in the air melted away. "Like I'm fire, so I like to think I would have blasted her to pieces." Knowing you, probably an explosion, Piper said. Leo grinned and made a humi gesture. I wonder what would have made it change, Jason said. Fire instead of storm, like what would have set off a different chain of events? Leo shrugged. I guess we'll never know. Percy thought that over. Maybe it would have been Leo if he had never fallen into the pit, or if he had died down there. He looked at Annabeth, or maybe if someone had fallen with him. If none of you are injured, it might be prudent for you to make your way to Olympus now, Chiron said, checking them all over. Better not keep them waiting. Percy glanced at himself, then at the others. He blinked in surprise. They were fine. Granted, a few cuts and bruises, and Frank was definitely favoring his left arm, but overall near mint condition. Not bad, huh? Annabeth said next to him, holding out her arms to check them over. Me better than last time, Percy said, thinking about Annabeth being stabbed. Not for you, though, she pointed out. In Manhattan you weren't hurt at all, curse of Achilles. Oh yeah, Percy said, before shaking his head. I think I'm done with that curse now. If I get it again, I'll probably blow up, or Achilles will have a heart attack and just straight up knock me out. Annabeth laughed. Through the trees, Argus appeared, twirling his car keys in his fingers with little clinks. An eye on his shoulder winked at Percy. Chiron clapped his hands once to get their attention. Right, he said, you will all have to be on your way now. His eyes flicked from Percy's war paint to the mud covering everyone else from the waist down, smears still over their mouths. Well, you have just won a war. I'm sure they're not expecting you to look fresh off the runway, but please do apologize for any muddy footprints you may leave. Don't worry, Chiron, Annabeth waved him off as only she could. It'll be fine. Chiron said noncommittally, well, off you go and good luck. Please remember to be polite, he stressed, fixing a stare at Percy, who shrugged. I will if they will, he murmured, double-checking he had Adamas before taking Annabeth's hand as they all began to walk towards the tree line and to the road beyond. They passed the smoldering remains of Thalia's tree, dryads running frantically around it, some on their knees in the dirt with their hands pressed to the charred bark. Every now and then a blue pulse would radiate from it. It looked like they were trying to re-establish the protective barrier. Peleus lay to the side watching mournfully. He had soil in between the copper scales of his wings. It should heal, apparently, said Hazel to the group. I heard a faun talking about it. Thalia'll like that, Percy said, craning his head to stare up at the blackened branches shooting up into the blue sky. Hyper called shotgun once they reached the road, running towards the passenger side of the white van that they usually used to transport demigods for quests or battles, or to transport their strawberry deliveries to restaurants. Delphi's strawberry service was printed on both sides with a little strawberry painted underneath, no doubt by Rachel, who he hoped was okay after the battle. She had been helping in the med tents. Twigs cracked underneath his feet as Percy walked towards the van. Argus grabbed the door handle and yanked the door back, letting it roll to the right to reveal rows of seats. They blurred for a split second. Percy rubbed his eyes, thinking he was just tired, but when he looked back, 2 extra seats had been added, effectively making the van an 8-seater. Helpful. They all piled in, unanimously bullying Hazel and Leo into the middle seats, which they accepted with grumbles under their breath. Percy and Annabeth sat in the back, Hazel in the middle of them, and linked hands behind the daughter of Pluto's headrest. Argus flicked a checking look over all of them, the 100 stares leaving Percy feeling just a little exposed, before twisting the keys and starting up the van. The engine hummed to life like a purring cat, and Percy tried to remember the last time he had been in a car. The Italian Fiat in the pit, whom technically it hadn't been moving. It was probably the police cruiser he jacked while on the run from Estheno and Uriel. He'd missed the feeling of driving, or of being driven. It meant he could just lean his head on the window and let the colors all blur into one. The dark greens of the trees, the gray of the cracked road, the blinding white of the sun in the sky. A little air freshener swung from side to side from the rearview mirror. It smelled aptly like strawberries and mixed nicely with the leather smell from the seats. Percy relaxed and closed his eyes. A weight fell onto his arm, and Percy smiled softly at the curls of Hazel's hair spilling over his shoulder and the steady breathing he heard from under them. She was out like a light. He met Annabeth's eyes over her head, and they both grinned. The journey from Camp Half-Blood to the Empire State Building usually took anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half. And Percy spent most of that time with his forehead pressed firmly against the cool glass and his thumb rubbing the back of Annabeth's hand as the scenery slowly transitioned from the sea and forests to buildings and people. Jason, Leo, and Frank had talked for a little while in low tones so as to not wake up Hazel, but now all lolled in their seats too, a sleeping Leo being crushed from each side by the other two. Adrenaline was a hell of a drug, and Percy was glad he still had some pumping around his body. He might need it. Piper, who was looking as if she now regretted calling shotgun, had shifted around in her seat so she could have a conversation with Annabeth. Percy heard a few words drift through his ears but ultimately lost focus, instead staring out the window and trying to spot his mother in the crowds of people on the pavements. He'd survived the final fight. His friends were alive. His mother was the highest priority once they left Olympus. The van jolted as it went over a pothole and they all jumped an inch or two out of their seats. Hazel spluttered awake, the three boys in the row in front of them all suddenly shoving each other off themselves. Hazel sat bolt upright before turning to look at him and biting her lip. "I think I drooled on you," Hazel whispered apologetically to him, blushing at the wet mark on his sleeve. He raised an eyebrow, lifting the beads of moisture out of the fabric with ease and floating them around her face. "You!" Hazel screwed her face up and using her golden vambraces batted them away, much to the amusement of the pair. "Not to quote Shrek so blatantly, but are we there yet?" Leo yawned, ducking and twisting to see the buildings through the windscreen. Argus rolled his eyes, making it look like his body was swirling, but pointed over the wheel at something in the distance. A large building was growing a few streets over. A very large building indeed, the Empire State Building. Suddenly, everyone was a lot more awake than they had been before. Going to see the full Olympian Council was no small feat and was usually reserved for big life or death scenarios. They rolled to a halt in traffic when the light in front turned red, and Argus turned round in his seat, gesturing at the doors. "Oh, hold on." Frank shuffled round and pulled the handle, letting the door slide open. They all wriggled out, Percy realizing that he hadn't actually put his seatbelt on, and weaved through the brightly colored cars to the pavement, Jason slamming the door behind them. Percy didn't know where Argus was going to park and hoped he had enough fuel if he was going to keep circling the building. They walked through the glass doors into the lobby of the Empire State Building. The guard, a bald man with pale blue eyes, didn't even look up from where he was scrolling on his phone. Percy saw his thumb swipe right on a picture of a buff man with hooves like a satyr. 600th floor, please," Annabeth said, resting an elbow on the smooth marble counter. "I'm afraid." "Oh, shut up," Percy rolled his eyes in frustration. "When has that ever worked with us? Come on, man." The guard looked up and pulled a displeased face, clearly recognizing him, his gaze flicking venomously to the muddy footprints they'd tracked through the room. Frank sheepishly poked at one with the tip of his shoe but only made it worse. "It's always something with you lot." The guard shook his head, mumbling under his breath as he reached for the key card. "Do you know how long it takes to get Icor out of that doormat?" "Nope," Percy said, taking it out of his hand. "Have fun." They all squeezed into the lift. The doors closed with a ding and Percy pushed the key card into the slot. The card disappeared and a new button appeared on the console, a red one that said 600. Piper smacked it. None of them said a word when Waterfalls by TLC began to play, but they all cracked up. Percy shook his head. Yeah, this was much better than the lift out of the pit. 5 or 6 don't go chasing waterfalls later. The lift dinged and the doors slid open. Piper and Leo gasped. Hazel and Frank grabbed each other's hand. Jason's jaw dropped. "Oh," Annabeth said with a grin, "I forgot you've never been to Olympus before. I've been renovating it since it was destroyed last year. Cool, huh?" "Yeah," Jason breathed, "you could say that." Percy and Annabeth shared a look, then led the group onwards. The others hesitated a little at first, still standing on the narrow stone walkway in the middle of the air before joining them, looking around in awe. Below them was Manhattan from the height of an airplane. In front of them, white marble steps wound up the spine of a cloud into the sky. Their eyes fixated on the end of the stairs, and Percy wondered if he'd looked like that the first time he'd been here. From the top of the clouds rose the decapitated peak of a mountain, its summit covered with snow. Clinging to the mountainside were dozens of multi-leveled palaces, a city of mansions all with white-columned porticos, gilded terraces, and bronze braziers glowing with 1,000 fires. Roads wound crazily up to the peak, where the largest palace gleamed against the snow, somehow even taller and grander than the last time he had seen it. Annabeth's doing, probably. Precariously perched gardens bloomed with olive trees and rose bushes. There was an open-air market filled with colorful tents, a stone amphitheater built on one side of the mountain, a hippodrome and a colosseum on the other. An ancient Greek city, except it wasn't in ruins. It was new and clean and colorful the way Athens must have looked 2,500 years ago. "How?" spluttered Leo, looking down, then up, then down again and turning faintly green. "A lot of mist and a lot of duct tape," Percy said. "Come on, let's get this over with." He led them quickly through Olympus, avoiding the water naiads who were dancing in the fountains and enticing them to join. A quick glare averted hawkers in the market who claimed to sell half-price ambrosia on a stick, fireproof greaves and genuine dragon leather petasus, as seen on Hephaestus TV, which just looked like sun hats made out of jerky. In the park, many young men and women who Percy knew to be minor gods and goddesses were laid out on suns while nymphs in white robes walked around, the symbol of Apollo, a golden lyre wreathed in laurels hanging around their necks. Several of them eyed Percy sitting up to watch their little group walk through. Mutters and congratulations followed them, everyone strangely keeping their distance. "This is so cool," said Piper, craning her head around to try and take in everything. Percy chewed his lower lip. They followed the tiled road up to the large palace. Steps led up to a central courtyard. Past that, the throne room with its massive columns rising to a domed ceiling gilded with moving constellations. Percy spotted Zoe's constellation and smiled sadly. The basic layout hadn't changed since Annabeth had taken to redesigning everything, though there were so many little details that caught his attention. The 12 enormous thrones were still arranged in an inverted U, just like the cabins at Camp Half-Blood. An enormous fire crackled in the central hearth pit. A small girl sat just out of sight on it. A large aquarium took up most of the wall to the right of all the thrones. Bessie was swimming happily around, swishing his serpent tail and poking his head out the top of the water, and Percy almost wandered over to him to say hello. But there was a slightly bigger matter at hand. Each throne was occupied, the gods 15 feet tall and staring at their group as they walked in. Hades lounged in a stony guest chair to the side of the hearth, his dark cloak spilling onto the floor. He locked flat eyes with Percy instantly before softening upon seeing Hazel behind him. Annabeth's hand slipped into his and Percy held it tightly. The meeting could either go very well or very wrong. Zeus sat in the head chair on the left in his dark pinstripe suit, his black beard neatly trimmed and his eyes sparking with energy. Next to him sat Hera with her silver hair braided over one shoulder and a dress that shimmered colors like peacock feathers. He could almost sense Annabeth restraining a glare. On Zeus's right was Poseidon, but Percy avoided looking at his father. Next to him, Hephaestus was still a huge lump of a man with a leg in a steel brace, a misshapen head and a wild brown beard, fire flickering through his whiskers. Hermes was wearing a business suit today, but rather than scribbling notes or scrolling through his phone, he had leaned forwards in his throne, resting his elbows on his knees and paying full attention. Apollo too was uncharacteristically still, blue eyes watching his father. At least Dionysus looked as bored as usual, twirling a grapevine between his fingers. Ares drummed his fingers on the arm of his throne. A curl graced his lips unkindly. On the ladies' side of the throne room, Demeter was winding a lock of dark hair around her finger. Athena was observing her daughter. Artemis, like her twin brother, was fixated on her father closely but for a split second nodded almost imperceptibly to Percy. Then there was Aphrodite on the end, who was biting the nail on her thumb, though it remained long and flawlessly pink despite her nibbling. All the Olympians in one place. He and Annabeth shared a look, but when Percy looked back, another pair of silver eyes were burning into his own. The goddess of wisdom had an unrecognizable expression on her face as she watched him. "Heroes," Zeus greeted them tersely. Chapter 64. Percy XLI. Surprisingly, Hera spoke up, not interrupting Zeus, just smoothly following onto the end of his sentence before he could speak again. "You have defeated Gaia and her army, my valued heroes. Without you, we may not be here. You have our greatest gratitude for doing what we could not," she said, and Percy's eyes narrowed. Annabeth flicked a tense look in his direction for a split second. Hera saying something nice about them, to them? It was enough to make anyone concerned, Percy thought. Though he reasoned Hera had probably had the most riding on them defeating Gaia, since it was her that had brought all of them together and kick-started the prophecy in the first place against Zeus' orders, if they had failed. The god in question looked at her with sparks crackling in his eyes. His fist clenched on his throne, but before he could open his mouth, a different god jumped in. "Yeah, great going you lot," Apollo said, his white teeth not as blinding as they usually were. Gaia would have turned the earth into her own personal mud bath if it wasn't for you. Then who would worship us, huh? His grin flickered when Zeus' wrathful glare fell on him instead. You not only saved the mortals of this world, but you saved the demigods as well. Their attention bounced from one side of the throne room to the other as Artemis spoke up. A vein was standing out on Zeus' temple. Percy recognized the expression and felt like he was staring at an unstable nuclear bomb. His body began to feel restless and he tried not to fidget. The goddess of the hunt kept going, steadfastly talking, though her voice trembled slightly at the start. Without you all, many of my hunters, nieces, and nephews would be dead. My half-siblings would be dead, including my lieutenant. She nodded at Jason, who gave her a nervous smile. You and Thalia fought bravely. Thank you, Lady Artemis, said a cautious Jason. Percy could almost hear the ticking in Zeus' head as it swiveled around, almost daring someone else to speak. They have completed yet another great prophecy. A gruff voice spoke up and Percy's stomach twisted as Poseidon continued. Gaia has been scattered and effectively destroyed. Olympus stands undamaged. Percy couldn't stop himself. He locked eyes with his father. There was a warning in those sea-green depths, but also a whirlpool within. Percy couldn't decipher it. His words made it sound like he was on his side, but their last meeting, mostly a blur in Percy's memory, hadn't been the best. His eyebrows knotted together, but Poseidon looked away. Percy frowned. Aphrodite clapped her hands together. Look at you all, she cried, fresh off the battlefield after winning the war for us. Adorable, but perhaps I might. She clicked her fingers. Percy shuddered, clamping his eyes together. In the dark, a hand gripped his and he squeezed back, panicked, blinking black dots out his vision when he reopened them. He caught a glimpse of a red glow before it faded, and he was suddenly very aware that he had long sleeves for the first time in a while. Percy pulled a face, looking himself over, and froze. What? He was wearing a suit, not a fifth-grade stand in a dance hall with your classmates for 3 hours eating sweets and not dancing kind of suit, with all the bare ankles visible and flappy cuffs. No, this was on a James Bond level. His ichor-covered trainers had shapeshifted into a pair of black leather dress shoes. They pinched through his socks. He followed the trousers with his eyes, soft black fabric with iron creases for a bit of sophistication, all the way up to the belt, which kept a crisp white shirt tucked in, the first few buttons undone at his throat in a flattering way. The black suit jacket matched the rest of his outfit, with long sleeves down to his wrists, hiding his tattoo from Nyx. His face felt scrubbed and smooth, and when he reached up to rub his fingertips across it, he realized that his beard was gone and his war paint had been washed off. His hair felt shorter and neater. Adama's was still strapped across his back though, and he could feel Riptide in his pocket. Well, Percy grabbed Annabeth's arm as she staggered in her sudden heels and his eyebrows hit the roof. His brain forgot how to brain. Annabeth looked stunning. Her blonde hair was out of its sweaty ponytail and fell in curls past her shoulders. Her facial features were drawn on again with makeup, and the black eyeliner made the gray of her eyes send butterflies careening through Percy's chest. She held out her arms, seemingly at a loss with what to do with the dress she now wore. It was a dark emerald green. It fell straight to the floor except for the high slit in the skirt that showed a tan leg. The straps over her shoulders were thin but held up the V-neckline of the dress elegantly. Gold bands circled her muscled biceps and wrists. Percy opened his mouth to speak, but found he didn't have the words. He said eventually, before mentally facepalming. She looked at him, then looked at him again. Oh, she replied, looking slightly dazed. Behind them the others made similar exclamations. Jason, Frank and Leo all compared ties while Hazel and Piper too staggered in their heels. Percy couldn't help but soften out the hard lines in his face. Hazel looked lovely in a strapless blue dress that sparkled with diamonds and poofed out around her waist. Jason looked as speechless as he had felt, mouth open at Piper in a long black dress. 2 straps crossed over and knotted behind her neck to hold it up, her hair glittering with pearly flowers. Leo Wolf whistled at them all, and Frank grinned at him. Yes, Aphrodite beamed, that's more appropriate for our esteemed guests. Piper, darling, do try to not step on the hem of your dress. Percy saw Piper yanking up her skirt an inch or two to free her wobbling heeled foot. He frowned slightly as he felt the tightness around his elbows and shoulders. He'd never be able to fight well in a suit like this. He glanced at Aphrodite again with a crease in his forehead. Hermes cleared his throat. And, oh, shut up the lot of you, Ares roared, slamming a fist down on his throne, and the atmosphere of the throne room shifted yet again. Enough of the pandering. Percy lifted his chin up. His fingers twitched for his swords, but he clenched his fists to stop himself. I unfortunately agree, Athena said coolly. You make valid points about the survival of our children and mortals, the endurance of Olympus and the continuation of the gods, but we have all acknowledged this already. Dress it up however you want to minimize the threat. She cast a glance at Aphrodite, who filed her nails without looking at her. We all know that this is not what we convened to discuss. Zeus nodded and turned his glare on Percy. Percy felt an ugly shifting in his chest and stared back at him coldly, his jaw clenched. I agree too, Hades spoke up suddenly. This isn't what I'm here for any of this. I came to collect what is owed to me. He paused before amending. And to see my daughter, you look very nice and fought well, he said to Hazel awkwardly, who gave a hesitant smile. Then he too looked at Percy. You know the deal. Oh, after everything, Percy had almost forgotten. His hand reached back absently, his fingertips grazing the handle of the sword. He slid it out with a metallic scrape against his armor and span it in his hand once. The air in the room grew thick with tension. You promised that sword to me, Hades said quietly. Hand it over. Percy looked at him, then back at his sword. The ugly feeling in his chest was back. This was his sword. He had created it, blessed it, had both his own and others' blood dripping down it. Without it, he'd be dead 10 times over. Percy swallowed. He didn't want to hand it over, not since he'd fought the god of the pit with it. It was the only thing that could hurt him. The gods, even the ones who had spoken up, now shifted uncertainly at Percy's hesitance. Hades' eyes grew blacker. Percy, Frank whispered behind him. He'd had a plan, he remembered. He was going to take it to Tyson, get him to craft it into something else. A trident, he remembered uneasily, just like Gaia had shown him. Hades had asked for a sword, not a trident. A technicality, sure, but he figured it would have held up. Percy flipped it around in his hand, holding the handle and pointing the blade straight down. But it was the sword for Annabeth. He didn't want this to turn into a situation where it was the sword or Annabeth. The choice was obvious, and in all honesty, after his stray thoughts during Gaia's attempt at persuasion, it didn't quite feel as safe in his hands as it once did, but that didn't mean he wouldn't try his Plan B approach. If he couldn't have it, no one could. This is the most powerful sword in the world, Percy mused aloud. Blessed in all 5 rivers of the pit, I got the water of the Cocytus all over it, I fell in the Styx with it, shaped it with the fire of the Phlegethon, drops of the Acheron landed on it, I jumped in the Lethe with it. I've made 2 primordials bleed with this sword and one of them didn't get back up. Hades' eyes were fixated on the sword. The Olympians' gazes shifted to the back of Hades' head. You could probably kill anything with it, Percy shrugged nonchalantly. More powerful than your Helm of Darkness, more powerful than the Master Bolt. Thunder cracked in the distance, but Percy paid it no mind. Its Chronos scythe just not melted, and that means it can destroy souls, scatter, and channel energy. I never tried to do the last one, but maybe you'll have more luck. He flipped it over so he held the black blade loosely between 2 fingers and held out the handle to Hades. It's all yours to keep forever, Hades, he said. Hades reached for the blade. Now, hold on just a second, Ares leaned forwards, eyes narrowing. He's not even on the council and we're handing him apparently the most powerful sword in the world. Screw that, give it to me. More powerful than my husband's Master Bolt, Hera frowned. That shouldn't be allowed. What happened to the last one? I melted it down to nothing, Hestia's young voice said quietly, and she stepped away from the hearth. All the Olympians looked to the eldest among them, who rarely, if ever, spoke during meetings. That would work, Hephaestus grunted. Hold on now, Hades raised a hand. Percy fought the urge to smile. It should be destroyed, Artemis said. Give it to no one, no being should wield that much power. Hades tried to speak again. Hades would become too powerful with it, that is true, Athena said, though she didn't look away from Percy. We were perfectly fine without it before. The risk that it could be taken in an attempt against us or cause a civil war is too high. Its destruction is the only way. Athena's word held value on the Olympian Council, which was why many of the younger gods followed her judgment and nodded. Ares' thick 2-handed sword shimmered into view, though the god didn't stand. Then the council agrees, wicked, give it here. Not to you, Apollo protested. Give it to Hestia, Hermes nodded. Now Hades, Poseidon's green eyes glinted. All that for yourself isn't a good idea, brother. I agree, Hades hissed loudly, cutting the rest of them off. Percy raised his eyebrows, so did his father. What? Poseidon asked. I said I agree, Hades rolled his eyes, looking startlingly like Nico. It should be destroyed. Wait, so why did you want it in the first place? Percy asked, speaking over the gods. To use against Gaia. Short of dragging her into the air and exploding her, it was unclear how she would have been defeated, Hades said, and Percy saw Leo grin slightly as if he was playing it out in his head. Hades turned to Percy. But then I saw you begging for the daughter of Athena back, killing and breaking your way into my home, threatening me and completely disrupting the plumbing in my house. You claimed that if she remained dead you would abandon the prophecy and that, what was it? Gaia could destroy the world for all I care. Annabeth looked at him with wide eyes. A few of the gods burned stares into the back of his head. Percy had forgotten he'd said that. After you said that, I knew your Achilles curse would have to go too. Hades continued, and Percy tilted his head. He had wondered why Hades had wanted it gone during a war but hadn't questioned it at the time, having more on his plate to worry about. Nothing good comes from having invulnerability in the level of instability you had. To have such a weapon in your possession after it had served its purpose, especially after sending you back to the pit, would have been unwise. I have no need for it. Frankly, it would make a mess of the underworld. Too much paperwork for those that died without souls. Cool as a cucumber, Hades took it and passed it carefully into Hestia's hands, then wiped his hands off on his robes. The goddess took it to the hearth and placed Adamas into the center, the flames licking harmlessly at her skin. The fire grew red hot and Percy watched sadly as his sword melted into liquid metal and trickled through the coals. A part of him cursed in burning anger, wanting to do nothing more than shove his hands in and pull it back out. What if he needed it? What if he needed it soon? For the first time since the meeting began, Zeus spoke, and Percy began to crave the feeling of Adama's grip in his hands. If you are all done trying to sway the council, he said quietly, his eyes boring into Percy, I think it is time to take a vote. They all fell silent at that, both demigods and gods alike exchanging nervous glances. A muscle jumped in Percy's cheek. His fingers rested on the outline of Riptide still in his pocket. Oh yeah, he asked casually, what on Zeus? The god's eyes sparked. Athena, he said without looking away, what's your verdict? Athena looked at Percy. I have told you before that wise counsel is not always popular but always truthful, she said, do you remember? Yes, Percy said, trying to keep his voice calm. You said it was bad strategy to keep me alive, then you said last year you made a mistake, things changed. Her eyes flashed at Percy's words, and yet things have changed again. You were a risk before, I occasionally take risks, now you are a threat. Mother, Annabeth's fists were clenched as she stepped up shoulder to shoulder with Percy. Athena turned her gaze on her daughter. He did not believe me when I told him that his fatal flaw may destroy us as well as himself. Now he has already destroyed who he was. This is not the same Perseus Jackson who defeated Kronos. You can't say that. Her mother looked at her a little sadly. I told you not to get involved with him, that nothing good would come of your relationship. She looked at Percy. And I told you I did not approve, to leave her alone. You ignored my counsel. Yeah, Percy shrugged. I did, I don't regret it. Athena's face turned cold. She was a terrible enemy to have, especially as a mother-in-law, but he wasn't going to stand there and say that his relationship with Annabeth was a mistake to anyone. It was none of their business. You must understand, she said. It is not that I want you dead. You are still a hero of Olympus and we are grateful for what you have done. I merely point out the uneven scales in this decision. They are not weighed in your favor. They rarely are, he replied, a low anger burning in his stomach. Zeus nodded to himself. Hephaestus. The god of the forge stroked his blackened beard. I'm not sure. Dad, Leo protested, but the god shrugged. He's an okay kid, he's helped me before, but he's different now. A machine gone faulty. With those types of things it's always only a matter of time before they explode. He's not a machine, Dad. Hephaestus shrugged again. There's no difference to me, broken is broken. Family reunions, huh, murmured Percy to a somewhat frantic Frank. Dionysus, Athena asked. Mr. D looked at Percy flatly. Athena makes some valid points. That upstart Luke Castellan was just the same as he is now, and look how that went. Dionysus, Hermes growled. I'm not wrong. If Athena thinks it is the best choice, I side with her. he said, and Percy thought about the Dionysus in his vision. It didn't seem so bad now. Thanks, Mr. D, Percy said, but the god merely stared out the windows. Ares. I'll do it myself if you all want, he grinned. Oh, I'd love a rematch, Percy said, a nasty feeling spreading through his body. Maybe you could try and win this time. Flames flared out of the war god's shades and Annabeth stepped on his foot. In her pointy heels, it made him wince. What are you doing? She whispered, sounding panicked. Percy breathed out and shrugged. Being honest, he whispered back. Well, stop, she hissed. Apollo, Zeus raised an eyebrow. He a little confused, but he got the spirit, Apollo said, nodding. Percy's a good bro. He's fought 2 wars for us and only returned my lyre with 1 tiny scratch on it, but Hephaestus buffed it out. You can't even see it anymore. Anyway, Percy's a good dude. My offer of archery lessons still stands. You know, I might actually take you up on that now, Percy replied, and Apollo gave him a thumbs up which he returned. I agree, Artemis said. He may be a man, but I believe he is to be trusted. Percy has shown great bravery and loyalty in the past. He held up the sky for me so I could fight. Olympian justice must be exactly that justice. I find myself unable to recall any real crimes being leveled against him. Percy nodded his head at her in respect, and she did the same. The murder of my child, Ares banged a fist on his throne. Gaia mentioned that. They all looked at him. If you can tell me his name, sure, I'll plead guilty to that, Percy said. Just tell me his name. Ares floundered angrily. Yeah, that's what I thought, Percy said. The acquisition of the blessing of Nyx, Athena asked. At this, silence did fall, and Percy saw several Olympians lean forward to listen. He didn't fail to notice the sudden attention of his friends either. I wasn't aware that was a crime, Percy stated. But how did you acquire it? Hades asked. She burned it into my arm, he shrugged. What favor did you do for her? Athena specified, her eyes sharp and glinting at his avoidance. Percy sighed, now or never. I killed Apate for her, he said. Murmurs resounded around the hall. The goddess of deceit, Artemis asked, raising an eyebrow. He nodded. Why? Asked the moon goddess with what seemed like genuine curiosity. Percy frowned. Because she had lied to him, because she had hurt his friends. They were factors, but the real reason was probably the most helpful to him right now. If I didn't kill her, Nyx would kill me, he shrugged. I had stuff to do, so I chose. He felt Annabeth's hand slip into his. Life and death scenario then, Hermes said. Would none of us do the same? I doubt so. What of the murder of his stepfather? Dionysus asked, swirling his can of Diet Coke. Let us not pretend we didn't hear that one. Eyes back on him, Percy's jaw clenched and he saw Poseidon's do the same. He deserved it, they said in unison. Their eyes met briefly before Poseidon looked away. The deaths of the other minor gods, Athena asked, recapturing his attention. He thought of Ephage's whales. Self-defense, he shrugged. Oh, he's got an answer for everything, hasn't he? Demeter muttered before speaking up louder. I'm with the others on this, I'm afraid. Prevention is much easier than a cure, Aphrodite. Who are you again? Percy bit the words down that would certainly not help him. Perseus has a handsome face and a kind heart inside. Heroes' tales do so often end in tragedy, but I will not contribute to his, nor would I rip apart the two of them yet again, Aphrodite said, gesturing at Percy and Annabeth. There is much more happiness left in his story. Yes, Mum, Piper beamed at her mother, who smiled back. Hermes, darling, she asked. I trust him, Hermes said instantly. We must not punish him for a future unknown and unproven. He has helped us before when no one else could or would, and we must not reward this with condemnation in turn. Nearly all of us have never experienced what he has had to go through, and we cannot say that we ourselves would turn out any differently. I am not confident that the majority of us would remain as strong and moral. He's a good man and does not deserve what has happened to him. He needs our support now more than ever. We have seen this happen before, or do we not learn from our mistakes in the past? He finished angrily, and a somber quiet fell over the large room. Percy smiled gently at one of his favorite gods. Hermes was a good man too. It is because of our mistakes in the past that this is such a delicate decision, Hermes, said Athena. We do not imagine the path that he is already on, the path littered behind him with bodies both immortal and mortal alike. The good thing about paths is that you can simply step aside and leave it, Hermes returned. I am the god of travelers and I see countless of those who lose their way yet reach their goal regardless. The ramifications of such actions you propose could, in theory, create even more paths for others. I do not believe our children would react kindly to us if you follow through today. No, Frank said, voice wavering but strong, we wouldn't. You suggest what, an uprising from the demigods? Demeter asked, humor in her tone. It's not like it would be a surprise, Percy muttered, despite the hands behind him desperately grabbing his arms and shoulders in an attempt to shut him up. Luckily, the majority didn't seem to hear him, but Artemis raised an eyebrow in acknowledgement and Hades glared at him. Arrogance is a family trait, I'm afraid, nephew, Hades said, though I doubt I get a vote. You don't, but let's hear it anyway, Ares said, clearly eager to hear another argument against him. Actually, I think I'll abstain. Trying to kill children for what they might do isn't my style, is it, brother? He directed at Zeus, who ignored him. Hestia. I cannot cast a vote either, Hestia frowned, but as the first to be eaten by father, I would not wish family turning on family on anyone else in the world. That said, she returned to tend to the flames. Family keeps us strong, Hera nodded. Without it, we are nothing. Perseus has served us well over the years and will continue to do so. Will I now? Percy mumbled. His arms tingled with building adrenaline. Something in his stomach tugged repeatedly, just begging to be let loose. I suppose there's no point even asking for your vote, Poseidon, said Zeus. Poseidon looked at Percy again. Was his own face that hard to read? My son has saved Olympus twice over, Poseidon said. And his only request has been that we treat each other and our children better. I, for one, will treat my child better. I will not hear of his destruction. Percy couldn't not smile, though it was small. He had hurt and almost betrayed his dad, but he still didn't hate him. Only Zeus was left. Jason's blue eyes were big and pleading. We're going to tie, Annabeth muttered, counting on her fingers. 6 for 5 against 1 left. What happens when there's a tie? Hazel asked her father. Usually Zeus overrules, but there isn't just one vote left, Hades said, and the other gods looked up confused. Percy frowned. Who could? Oh. The minor gods, he said in shock. What? Zeus thundered. After the Olympian victory in the Second War against the Titans, some of the minor gods were granted positions and thrones on the Divine Council at Percy Jackson's request, Athena said, like she was reciting from a history book. She probably was, probably one she'd written. That's 8 more votes, Hermes said excitedly. I'll get them. He pulled out his phone and tapped away rapidly with his thumbs. And Hebe, he muttered under his breath as he typed, group chat, name is execution of valued hero Percy Jackson, please come by earliest convenience, very important. There, he finished, punctuating the word with a stab of his thumb at the screen. Execution, Percy joked. I thought you were voting to build me a statue. His joke fell very flat. Every Olympian, friend or foe, gave him the side-eye look. Too soon, he turned and asked his friends, who were also not amused. Percy, this is serious, Jason said. It's fine, they've done this before, Percy waved off, keeping the anger burning in his stomach quiet. More yeses than nos this time, but that's to be expected, isn't it? How are you not freaking out? Piper asked him quietly, her multicolored eyes worried. It'll be fine, Percy shrugged, then very deliberately he scratched his Nyx tattoo. Their eyes widened. Where? Leo coughed the word into his fist. You choose the location, bro, I'll ask you later, Percy joked under his breath. Again it fell flat, but at least they knew now. If the vote was no, Percy was shadow traveling the sticks out of here. He still didn't really know how to, but he figured that half the Olympian Council bearing down on him would be enough to motivate a quick jump. Alaska was a big place, largest state in America. He honestly wished the gods good luck if they tried to find him and anyone else who coincidentally made their way up there. And then from there, he'd start to plan. He'd get even. Annabeth nodded imperceptibly to him and slid her hand into his. He squeezed it once before letting go. She looked at him, puzzled. Don't know how many I can take, he murmured. A couple flashes began to light up the other side of the room as 8 thrones burst into existence, each with a minor god or goddess sitting on them. Percy recognized the majority of them but tilted his head when it came to 2 he hadn't met yet. Titch and Hebe, Annabeth muttered in his ear. Luck, chance and fortune, youth, forgiveness, former cupbearer to the gods. Thanks, he muttered back. Glancing at the four-leafed clovers adorning one of the women's dresses, he took a wild guess at who was who. The others he knew and had talked to before. Triton raised his eyebrows at him in annoyance and Percy shrugged at his immortal half-brother. Hermes cleared his throat. Welcome, he said. I trust you understood the content of my text. Why else would we be here, Hypnos drawled, to vote on the little hero's life? We are at a draw, said Zeus. 6 of us have voted for, including myself. The others have voted against. Make your decisions now. Oh, so Zeus had finally cast his vote then, Percy thought. He wanted him dead. What a surprise. Right, well, I thank you for the throne and cabin, but I'm afraid I say sweet dreams to you, said Hypnos, and Percy scowled at him. It probably didn't help he'd opposed his son Morpheus in the last war. His fingers started to tap on his jeans. I disagree, said Hebe. He has made mistakes but does not deserve to pay for them with his life. I say let him live. Nice lady, Percy thought. He'd ask Annabeth to make her a statue. Nemesis shook her head, her short dark curls swaying from side to side. She wore a red motorcycle jacket. I am the goddess of revenge, she said, and I know what someone overwhelmed with it looks like. He cannot be trusted. I vote for. He heard Piper swear under her breath. Percy is a hero, Iris shook her head. His intentions are pure. Percy actually disagreed with her there, remembering how he had wanted nothing more than to see Pasiphae or Apate or a whole group of others dead just because they had betrayed him. But he wasn't about to shoot himself in the foot, so remained quiet. Iris is right, spoke Nike, her polished golden wings flapping behind her indignantly. He has made it this far by sheer will and skill. He is a champion and must be treated as such. He has won the right to live. Can you truly not see what is in front of you? Hecate sneered, stroking the polecat in her lap. He is a threat to all of our children. The mist cannot hide the spite and anger under his skin. I say he is to be destroyed. Lou Ellen, the head counselor of the Hecate cabin, was probably going to be apologizing to him for months if he survived this. Percy saw his father give a minuscule jerk of his head and Triton sat up in his throne awkwardly. Perseus may be a liability, but he is a son of Poseidon and should survive, he said, and looked as if he was going to say more but just leant back in his chair again. Thanks bro, Percy said with false sweetness and Triton glared at him. We're almost tied again, said Annabeth. If Titch votes for they win. She turned a venomous scowl on Titch, looking like some kind of hot murderous CEO in her silky dress. Percy almost forgot to listen. The goddess of luck put a hand on her chin. Perseus Jackson, she said, and gods and demigods alike leaned in to hear her. That's me, Percy nodded. She laughed softly. Don't worry, you've had quite a bit more than your fair share of bad luck, she said. I think it's time you had some good. Oh, Hazel gasped quietly behind them. I vote against, she said simply. Percy hadn't been counting in his head, but surely that meant. You live, Annabeth slammed into him and he caught her before her ankles could buckle in her heels. You get to live. Lucky me, Percy said flatly, kissing the top of her head. Zeus was scowling, but he waved away the extended council of minor gods. Titch winked at him before whirling away in a flutter of green clovers. They fell to the marble floor delicately. There was a breathless silence. Well, Percy clapped his hands together once Annabeth let him go. That was fun, wasn't it? The clap echoed around the room. Zeus glared at him. The council has ruled. Do not presume to be so lucky next time. Next time? Percy asked, his voice finally turning cold. Next time? There won't be a next time. There's actually never going to be a vote on my life or any other demigods ever again. His friends blinked, the gods blinked. Hera raised her eyebrows. What do you mean? She asked. Call it a request if it makes you feel happy. Gaia's dead and gone, isn't she? What no reward ceremony this time? He asked, and the deep anger that had been simmering in him throughout the meeting burst through like a tsunami. Not going to offer me godhood again, wonder why. Percy, Hermes began worriedly. Yeah, I'm sorry Hermes, I like you but I really think I'm gonna keep talking, he said, brushing him off. Those of you who voted to keep me alive, yeah, thanks and everything, appreciate it, but there should never have been a vote in the first place. Somehow I forgot that saving Olympus these days was a death sentence, and the rest of you who want me dead, you can take your little votes. Percy Annabeth grabbed his arm. And you can shove them up your ungrateful. Man, you gotta. Jason was at his other side, an arm around his waist trying to pull him back. Godly. Percy. Backstabbing, uncaring, lying. A hand clamped over his mouth as he glared in fury at Zeus, who stared at him in disbelief. He finished his insult, and though it was muffled, he knew they'd heard the swear words by the way their eyes widened. His friends dragged him backwards, huddling around him protectively. The gods stared at him aghast. Percy jerked his chin out of its hold and continued to spit acidic words at them, eyes blazing. What, you thought I was just gonna take this lying down like last time? Percy's laugh was icy and fake, and even Ares leant back in his chair in alarm. You're damn right I'm not the same person I was last year. I asked you to pay attention to your kids last year, but this sure as hell ain't what I meant. Memory gone, separated from my family, left in the pit to rot, and now you want me dead because I didn't save your stupid world the way you wanted me to. Well, that's too damn bad. Oh, I'm so sorry you were split between your two divine godly forms. How bad that must have been for you. It's not as if your kids were out here dying or being tortured or... The hands were back, and he kept his head above them like a drowning man to keep shouting. Don't even pretend to care, we're just expendable to you, aren't we? He snapped. Oh, my son just got his face torn off by a manticore, better go have another one, just add it to the list, whoops, you mother F. His Nyx tattoo was smoking, and cracks appeared in the marble stones underneath his feet. Several flower displays fell over, the chandeliers above rocking to and fro wildly, the fountains exploding into shards of ice. Aphrodite squealed, his chest heaved. You know, you all got lucky I didn't accept immortality last time, 'cause if I knew I wouldn't be instantly killed for it, I would have been up here every day just absolutely beating the sh. Frank's arm slid round his neck to put him in a sleeper hold. Percy recognized as an act of care of trying to keep him from being obliterated, but he really didn't care anymore. Without meaning to, his body blurred and he slid through them like smoke shadow traveling in front of them and stomping up the few stairs that lead up to the gods. Trails of smoke and steam followed him. His father stared at him in horror. Bianca D'Angelo, Lee Fletcher, Castor Charles Beckendorf, Michael Yu, Selena Beauregard, Ethan Nakamura. How many of them would still be alive if you got up off your asses and actually put in the work instead of hiding and giving us little tips as if you don't already know what needs to be done? If you stopped treating us like we owe you something just for being demigods. Oh, you gave us life, some life. I just love finding out that I'm a demigod, and that basically what that actually means is that I'm more likely to die before I reach high school. Ancient laws, my ass, you wrote them. Can't you leave us alone for things you can do yourselves? Die immortals, you're immortals, not bobbies. Take some responsibility or start using contraceptives. He ran a hand through his hair, wishing he had his sword in his hand. And yeah, sure, we'll fight against the threats to Olympus because, odds are, whoever takes over will probably be worse. But it really ain't a good thing to always be the lesser of two evils. Kronos got demigod followers not because they really thought he would actually take care of them, but because they were sick and tired of you. If it wasn't for the fact Gaia was a blatant sociopath who wanted to kill all the mortals, she probably would have been great. What do you think will happen if one day someone comes along and they're just as bad as you but offering something other than inevitable death? How hard is it to care, to intervene when we're being killed left, right, and center? I don't have kids, and judging by my predicted lifespan I never will, but isn't the whole point of being a parent to protect your children? How is my mother, a normal mortal, doing that job way better than you guys ever have? How hard is it to just be normal functional beings? Because now I know you don't really care about mortals, but in our world seeing someone do something you don't like and deciding to kill them for it isn't a democratic decision for the good of the world, it's murder. So if you're gonna sit up here and declare me guilty for murder, then you should take a good long look in the mirror, and then back at the demigods who just saved your stupid little lives, and figure out who's more guilty here, me or all of you. Percy heaved in a breath, forgetting the last time he'd actually inhaled, and took in the absolute silence, his shouts ringing around the throne room. The gods were staring at him, all of them in shock. Even Zeus and Athena seemed speechless. A muscle in Poseidon's jaw jumped. Percy blinked. He wasn't quite sure what he had been shouting for the last minute or so, the words forcing their way out of his now sore throat, but he seemed to have got his point across. His skin burned. He breathed in again and nodded. He looked around, not really seeing anything. Yeah, he said vaguely. Yeah, you know what, go on, have a little chat without us, because that's pretty much all I have to say to you. Then he breathed in, turned around, feeling very anticipatory of a lightning bolt about to hit him in the back, and he walked down the stairs. But nothing hit him, no one spoke, no one except him moved. His friends were staring at him with startled eyes and open mouths. He took Annabeth's hand and waited for her to slip her heels off. Then they all walked over to the doors in silence. Hades' eyebrows were through the roof. He seemed impressed more than anything, but Hestia watched them leave with even more worry on her face. Once they were outside, Percy used the fountain water to slam the doors shut behind them, cracking deep ravines all through the wood. Chapter 65. Annabeth VII. The walk back through Olympus was unnerving. She wasn't sure how they knew, though, by the volume Percy had been shouting at. She wouldn't be surprised if they'd actually heard him, but the residents of Olympus avoided them like the plague as they walked down the road. The street market had closed, eyes peeking through the metal shutters at them. The park was abandoned. The fountain was empty and quiet. It was like walking through a ghost town. She was just glad that when she had begun renovations, she'd made sure the road tiles were smooth. Her bare feet appreciated it. Her heels were nice, but she didn't have much practice in actually walking in them and let them hang off two of her fingers at her side. She glanced at Percy. He held her hand tightly, stare fixed on the ground. His black eyebrows were knotted together, though not as fiercely as they had been several minutes ago. He'd really just yelled at the Olympians. Of all his most dangerous, most idiotic, and completely thoughtless stunts, this one had to be the most reckless. He had shouted at the gods. He'd sworn to their faces, and if she was entirely honest, she knew she saw him about to spit on the floor before they'd tried to pull him back. And yet, he'd been right. Every word he'd said had been true. The act may have been thoughtless, but the words. Maybe they'd all been thinking them for a while. She caught Jason's eye over her shoulder, and Jason pulled a "what was that?" face before opening his mouth. "Percy," he began, "I'm not saying you were wrong, but gods, where did that come from?" Their pace slowed. Percy breathed out heavily through his nose. "I don't actually know," he said in his hoarse voice. I didn't mean to do that. It just all came out. I can't really even remember what I said. Was it I know it was bad, but was it really bad?" Kinda," replied Jason, scratching the side of his head. "Dude, you basically just kicked them all in the balls and told them cry about it," Leo said. "It was kinda bad, but kinda awesome." Above them, the idyllic sky, full of soft white clouds, ranging from baby pink to light blue, flashed momentarily black, an intense thunder rolling across Olympus, loud enough to make them rub their ears at the volume. "Drama queen," Percy muttered, and another clap of thunder cracked a few windows down the street. He frowned at them. "Did I break anything?" he asked. Annabeth thought of his clenched fists, the exploded waterworks, and the cracks crawling up the pillars, the shattered floor tiles, the inch of water across the floor, the sparks in Zeus' eyes. "A little," she told him. He knew her. He winced. "Guys, I'm sorry if I just got us all blacklisted from Olympus," he said. Once you've seen it all," Frank shrugged casually at Percy. They passed a bakery, and Annabeth could smell a mix every food she'd ever liked. Pretzels, baked cheesecake, mangoes, Sally Jackson's blue chalk chip cookies, and a dozen other things she couldn't pinpoint. When they had passed the low terracotta building earlier, it had been bustling with life, gods leaning over the counter to wave pointing fingers at mouth-watering cakes. Now it was silent. She caught a glimpse of a wobbling shadow and suspected the owner was hiding under the counter. "Will they do anything?" Hazel asked quietly as the top of the staircase came into view. Annabeth considered it with a crease in her forehead and a chew of her lip. "Maybe," she settled on. "On one hand, he did just kill Gaia, and they've kind of been in our debt for a while, but on the other, the gods have fragile egos. Percy may have just insulted them more than they've ever been insulted. And a half-and-half split on the Olympian Council is never a good thing, especially when Zeus and Poseidon oppose each other. That's usually how civil wars start." Annabeth snorted softly out her nose, almost in amusement. She and Percy had talked extensively about the Big Three's oath to not have more children at the destruction that a Big Three child could supposedly cause. They hadn't got it then, not really. They understood that they were often the children of prophecies and therefore more likely to start impactful quests, but it really all just came down to the Big Three being rivals. World War II all over again, children on both sides last time. She thought of the Big Three children they had. She couldn't see Hazel or Nico going against Percy. Poseidon and Hades, while rivals, weren't as bitter about it these days. But Jason, Praetor of New Rome, Thalia, Lieutenant of Artemis, 2 children of Hades, 2 children of Zeus, 1 child of Poseidon, the winning vote, able to turn the tide in more than one way. Annabeth cursed her parentage. She hated that she understood why her mother saw Percy as a threat. She held his hand tightly, almost holding their hands aloft, displaying to Olympus. She might understand their point, but she would never support it, not when it was Percy, not ever. Percy swore under his breath. "If they bring us into this somehow," he trailed off, as if realizing for the first time that continuing to angrily curse out the gods while they were still all on Olympus was a less than ideal situation. She and Piper exchanged a look. Annabeth let Percy go first down the stairs, not wanting him out of her sight while he was still fuming, and really him in a suit was a sight to behold. The tall black suit made his hair look darker, the green of his eyes the only color noticeable. His tattoo peeked out from under his cuff, and the loose collar and open shirt, with Jason a tie worked, made him look strong and respectable. With Percy, he looked like he'd just ditched a wedding, traded his tie for a cigarette and stolen a motorbike. He looked hot. Annabeth felt like slapping her brain back into her head. Now was not the time. They crowded into the lift, Percy punching the down button so hard the protective cover cracked. He winced again and ran a hand through his hair. No lift music came on this time. It didn't matter anyway, they were all lost in their own thoughts. Would it really come to a war with the gods? Would Camp Half-Blood suffer a similar civil war? Who would the rest of Camp Jupiter fight for? What about the demigod hunters, the Amazons, the satyrs? While theoretically she knew Olympus better than anyone, launching an attack in their domain would be a stupid move. Launching an attack, she mentally slapped herself again. What was she thinking? That was ridiculous, it wouldn't come to that. She hoped. The lift dinged, and Percy's hand met hers again. The guard scowled at them, before looking curiously at their new clothes. "No ichor or mud to track now, right?" Annabeth offered, and he muttered begrudgingly. They walked through the doors and she glanced around for any sign of their van or Argus. It was still classic New York, the streets full of bustling pedestrians and tourists, the roads full with cars, but there was no 100-eye man to be seen, no strawberry van. "Down there," Piper said quietly and pointed down an alley. Annabeth squinted her eyes and frowned. Argus and the van were parked down a small alleyway across the road, but there was a police car behind the van and Argus was shoved up against it. There was a police officer cuffing his hands, clearly intent on arresting him. Around Argus and the car the air looked slightly blurry, like heat waves rising off of hot tarmac, but Annabeth had no idea what the mist was showing the officer. "Hecate," Percy breathed in her ear. "Looks like," she replied, "or maybe Nemesis, whoever it was didn't take the vote well." Argus caught sight of them, all his eyes rushing to stare them down at once. He shook his head slightly when Annabeth gestured to go help him and slid his eyes away repeatedly, clearly telling them to go. "He doesn't want us to help?" Hazel asked. "He looks like he knows what he's doing. I reckon he can handle it," Piper said. "Besides, once the mist wears off, what charges could they hold on him?" "Multiple counts of homic ID, Percy muttered under his breath, but he was still scowling at the officer. She snorted. "This is stupid," Percy continued, sounding annoyed. "What's he gonna do, huh? Let's just go over there." "And do what?" she asked, though she herself was already vaguely planning a rescue mission involving Piper and a lot of charm speak. But Percy was already up and weaving through the cars held up by the red traffic lights. She caught up with him quickly as they ran and slid across the bonnet of a yellow taxi. It beeped angrily back at her. "Sorry," she heard Frank call behind her. Percy slipped into the alley as if it was second nature, and she darted in after him. Sticking to the shadows as they crept up behind the police officer, she pressed her back against the pointy brick wall to stay out of sight. She'd never had good experiences with police, mostly as a child on the run with Thalia and Luke. She glanced down, careful to watch where she was going with her bare feet. Trying to get the plan in motion, Annabeth turned round, motioning to Piper. But all of a sudden Piper was shaking her head with panicked eyes, pointing at something behind her. Annabeth whipped her head back in time to see Percy towering over the officer from behind, wrapping one arm around his neck, the other linking into his elbow and squeezing. "Oh, Annabeth ran up to them, keeping her face out of the choking officer's view, and slipped a hand into his pockets, finding the van keys and the handcuff keys easily. Maybe Hermes was around here too. She tossed the handcuff keys to Argus, who blinked at her, making him seem like a wall of flesh for a quick second before he started to uncuff himself. Then she looped round to the van, unlocked it and quickly pressed the clutch down, twisting the keys in the ignition to start the engine. "Get in," she hissed at the others as Percy began to lower the vaguely unconscious officer to the floor. She knew it took around 15 seconds for a chokehold to actually work, but it usually took even less time for them to get back up. It had only slightly ruined action movies after she had learned that. They all jumped through the van doors. Argus appeared and she moved out the way quickly to let him get in the driver's seat. She wasn't positive, but she suspected Leo had only called shotgun to avoid sitting in one of the middle seats again. Percy jogged over to them. He somehow looked more relaxed now. "We should be fine," he told her. "I had a look on the report sheet in the car and he hadn't even written down the number plate yet." "Excellent, doubt he memorized it," she said, climbing up. "Now shut up and get in." The door was still sliding shut as the van started moving, legs everywhere as they all tried to shuffle and clamber into seats. She ended up next to Percy and Frank in the middle. She groaned internally, though it did mean she could use Percy as a pillow. He was a good one. As the door finally rolled shut, she listened to Argus quickly changing gears and looked over her shoulder. Through the back windscreen, she saw that the rapidly shrinking officer was pushing himself up into a sitting position. He rubbed his head, looking confused. Is he gonna?" Piper gestured vaguely as they turned onto the road and into the traffic, which was now, thankfully, moving. He'll be fine," Annabeth waved it off, probably just wondering if he dreamed it. "Let's hope so," Jason nodded. Argus was probably the best getaway driver they could have had. Within a minute they'd taken about 6 rights and 4 lefts, taking them effectively away from the scene of the crime, the little strawberry-scented air freshener swinging crazily from side to side. The buildings outside rose and fell, and Annabeth eventually let herself relax into her seat. They were heading back home. She turned to look at Percy at the same time he looked at her. "Seatbelt," he said to her, and she cursed, realizing that she hadn't put it on. He grinned at her smugly, his own strapped across his chest. She pulled it around and clicked it in place. It was hard to do it sitting down with her dagger strapped to her thigh underneath her dress. She was sure Aphrodite thought it would look nice, but the reality was that it made it very uncomfortable to sit, and she wasn't sure she could pull it out without showing the world her pants. Aesthetically pleasing, but stupid. Trying to turn off, she gave up shuffling and leant on Percy, his arms wrapped round her immediately. Her eyes closed on instinct, reveling in the feeling of safety and warmth. "Next time you choke a police officer out, at least let me know so we can coordinate," she said without opening her eyes. "Will do," he replied before cursing under his breath. And she felt him hug her closer. "Forgot to go see my mum," he sighed. Annabeth's heart squeezed at that. She knew how much he'd miss Sally. "Your place is only about 15 minutes away," she reasoned, but he shook his head. "We've got stuff to do, things to finish. We'd have to leave almost as soon as we got there. I don't want to just turn up, say, 'Hi, Mum, I know I've been missing for the better part of a year,' and..." He stopped talking and looked down at her. "Does she know?" She didn't have to ask what he meant. "She knows you went in, but not that you got out." He swore again. "Right, well that makes it worse. I turn up and do all the 'Hi, Mum, yeah, sorry I was missing for a year, so you know how I fell into the pit of all pits. Yeah, I got a couple tattoos and killed Gaia anyway, gotta bounce by and then leave. She'd kill me on the spot and I wouldn't even blame her." He shook his head. "After," he said firmly. "After everything is all over." Annabeth rubbed a thumb over the back of his hand and frowned. He kept putting it off. She'd suggested he iris message her on the Argo. He said he didn't want to wake her. Again before the battle, he said he didn't want to worry her. She glanced at him. He was seriously procrastinating this. What was he afraid of? She thought about her own father. He hadn't heard much from her recently either. She'd send him a postcard she picked up in Italy, she decided. Her fingers unconsciously raised to spin his Harvard College ring that she'd threaded onto her coral necklace, or maybe give it to him in person. It could have been her imagination, but the trip back to camp took even less time than it did before. Well, luck was on their side. She sent a little prayer to Titch in her head, a sincere thank you. It felt like no time at all had passed before they were pulling off the road, the journey becoming a lot bumpier as they drove down the woodland path, away from the mortal world. When they lost sight of the main road and the hill came into view, Thalia's tree atop it looking a lot healthier, the van trundled to a stop and Argus cut the engine. She reluctantly pulled herself out of Percy's arms. She'd thought he was asleep. The bags under his eyes were getting darker every hour, it seemed, but to her surprise he was wide awake and opened the door for them. They climbed out, thanked Argus, and began the slow walk up the hill. The grass was warm on her bare feet. Reaching the top and seeing the valley, the big house with its bronze eagle weather vane and the dimly red strawberry fields in the distance never failed to make Annabeth's breathing even out. This was home. She was home. The golden fleece had been returned to the tree. Peleus curled up around the trunk protectively. His clean scales shone. Chiron was waiting for them at the big house. He didn't bat an eye at their new clothes. "So," he asked, looking nervous, "how did it go?" "It went," Percy offered. "Ah," Chiron replied, rubbing a hand over his head in a gesture Annabeth recognized all too well as stress. "I see." She winced slightly. "Yeah." Next to her, Percy suddenly whipped around. "Percy, Annabeth!" shouted a new, yet very familiar and so incredible to hear voice. Rapid hooved footfalls followed. She turned round on the veranda with a wide grin. "Die immortals, after all this." "Gee man," she heard Percy shout, his face splitting into one of the most genuine smiles she'd seen since, well, the start of the entire quest. Grover slammed into the pair of them in a tight hug. They both returned it instantly. Annabeth clutched the satyr like her life depended on it, pulling him close. His brown curls tickled her cheek. "It's been so long," Grover bleated, finally withdrawing from the hug. "I was starting to think I'd never see you two again." "Screw that," Percy said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "We'd never not come find you." "We missed you, goat boy." Annabeth felt like crying, seeing their little trio reunited at last. Grover's wide brown eyes were also starting to shine. His horns were a little wider than the last time she had seen him, his wispy beard a bit longer. He still had his reed pipes hanging at his waist. "I missed you so much," Grover said, "and then I started to get these crazy dreams and mood swings and our empathy link kept cutting in and cutting out." He gestured to Percy, who winced. "And next thing we know, we're at war and you two still hadn't come back and blah ha ha," he bleated, sniffling. Percy snatched him into a hug again. "Hey man, it's okay, we're okay, are those enchiladas?" Grover jerked his head back. "Where?" he demanded. Percy grinned at him. Grover blinked before he grinned back. He looked them all over. "Fancy clothes," he whistled, impressed. "Hey, I know you," Frank said suddenly, catching everyone's attention. Grover looked at him. "Hey, yeah, what was it? Frank, right, son of Ares?" "Yeah, Mars technically, but yeah." "Good to see you again," Grover shook his hand. "Do I still get your share of the tin cans?" Frank smiled. "They're all yours." Annabeth's chest felt warm at having most of her favorite people in the same place. This was the type of moment she wanted to live in, one she always made a conscious effort to remember as vividly as she could. Chiron looked at them all fondly. "Have we missed the shrouds?" she asked him. "Not yet. While I believe they are done, we are yet to burn them. The last are being placed near the canoe lake now." "We should go," said Jason, and the others nodded, heading that way. Annabeth suddenly felt ill. She hadn't counted the dead, nor had she asked. What if she had lost a sibling in the fight? It was all right for the others, she thought as she glanced at them. Most of them didn't have siblings, or if they did, they were either immortal or a cyclops. Piper wasn't on very good terms with her cabin. Leo barely knew them, and Frank had only just found out who his godly parent even was. Grover patted her shoulder, his face concerned. "I don't think I saw any of your siblings," he whispered, "but I don't know for sure." She nodded tightly. It didn't really help. She wouldn't know until she knew, saw it with her own eyes. Sure enough, right by the canoe lake were the shrouds. She scanned them rapidly, red shrouds covered in drawings of weapons for fallen children of Ares, gold ones littered with laurel wreaths for children of Apollo, and hot pink ones for Aphrodites that gave off waves of designer perfume when burned. No gray ones, no painted olive trees, no owl symbols. She breathed a sigh of relief, then felt awful. Lives had still been lost. Piper and Frank blinked. "Oh," Piper whispered, what are we supposed to do?" "You can stand up and say a few words if you like," Annabeth told them quietly, "but it's not a requirement of the head counselors, more of those who knew them the best." They pulled faces at that and stayed where they were. Annabeth understood it wasn't for them, it wasn't their place, and they knew that. They listened to the speeches until the flames died out, the last golden sparks drifting into the late afternoon sky. When the Apollo cabin brought out various instruments, they sat and listened to the songs that floated up into the air until candles and fires had to be lit for them to be able to see them. Grover played a little song on his pipes just like old times. "That's a nice song," said Jason. "What's it called?" Muskrat love, Grover said dreamily. When he played it, it seemed like all the grass blades around them danced gently to the tune. Marshmallows and salty popcorn packets were passed around quietly. Today feels like the longest day in the world, Hazel said, lounging on Frank. They all murmured in agreement. Annabeth glanced over at the mess hall pavilion. As far as she could see, the handful of demigods and satyrs at work had pretty much finished setting up all the additional tables. We should go sit down, she said, getting to her feet. The feast should start soon. What's the food like here? Asked Frank. Dude, it's awesome, said Leo, and for drinks you just ask for whatever you want and some spirits give it to you, anything you want. Anything? Asked Hazel. Within reason, Grover said, no alcohol of course. They walked to the mess hall pavilion slowly. It felt like they were all still gradually catching their breath. Satyrs joined them from the meadow. Naiads emerged from the canoeing lake. A few other boys and girls came out of the woods, and Annabeth smiled as she saw Juniper, who gave her a little wave. Though he later denied it, gave a little squeal and ran to hug her. Other demigods started to flock towards the pavilion too, Chiron's hooves heard clopping around on the stone inside. Annabeth missed sitting with all her siblings on table 6 but felt no guilt whatsoever leading them all to the table 3. The time of splitting them all up was done and gone. The torches blazed around the marble columns. A central fire burned in a bronze brazier the size of a bathtub. The tables were cleaner than she had ever seen them, covered in new white cloths trimmed in purple. Thanks to the extra tables sticking out and around of the pavilion, most of Camp Jupiter either sat in their cohorts or joined the rest of their siblings inside on their respective tables. She spotted Reyna sat with the majority of her centurions. They had already had to cram more tables in last summer with the legitimization of all the minor gods. They were running out of room. All in all, there were about 200 or 300 people chattering and laughing deafeningly by the time they were all seated. The top table, table 12, seated very few people. While Grover usually sat there, today he was glued to their sides with Juniper next to him. This left a handful of other satyrs and Chiron, whose end of the table had been heightened to reach his waist. Mr. D was nowhere to be seen. Finally, Chiron pounded his hoof against the marble floor of the pavilion and everybody fell silent. He raised a glass, to the gods. Everybody else raised their glasses, to the gods. Their table was silent. Annabeth lifted her chin. Wood nymphs came forward with the same platters of food she had seen since she was 7. Grapes, apples, strawberries, cheese, fresh bread, and sizzling barbecue. She never got tired of the smell. Apple juice, she said absently to her glass, reaching for it to take a sip of the sudden caramel liquid. Cool, said Frank, seizing his own. A Canada Dry cranberry ginger ale. His glass filled with a pinky-orange liquid. Annabeth raised her eyebrows, specific. Canada Dry, Leo snorted. What? Frank asked defensively. It's good. It's Canadian. Yes. Leo held up his hands. Nothing, just a regular Coke for a regular guy here, please. He took a sip of his Coke innocently. I'm with you there, Percy nodded to her right, and after a whisper his own glass quickly turned his familiar bubbly blue. Cheers, he winked at Frank. She loaded her plate with more than she realized and was hit with the reminder that she was starving. She added a few more peaches and drumsticks to her plate. The others were also piling it all up. This is so good, she heard Percy groan as he sank his teeth into a rib. Hey, where's everyone going? Hazel asked, and noticed everybody getting up, carrying their plates toward the fire in the center of the pavilion. Offerings to the gods before you eat, she said before taking a bite of a peach. Think we can leave that out tonight. Sounds good to me, said Piper darkly, biting into her own dinner with gusto. Grover looked confused. Why? He asked. Annabeth almost felt surprised. Grover had a lot of catching up to do. Remember the vote 2 years ago at the winter solstice? Annabeth asked him. Grover frowned. Yeah, he said. We just had a repeat of that. It nearly went the other way. Grover's eyes flashed. Oh, he said tightly. Then he deliberately bit into some of his food, taking part of his fork with it. She noticed they got a few looks for not getting up but refused to acknowledge them. An offering for the people who had just debated her boyfriend's life? No chance. They ate their dinner quickly and quietly. She was so lost in her own thoughts that she didn't realize she was done until her fingers hit her plate automatically. She'd eaten everything. She turned pleading eyes on Percy, who rolled his but gave in like he always did. She really should weaponize that. Here Percy tossed her an apple. She went red, but he didn't seem to notice, still wolfing down his stack of ribs. She took a bite and smiled to herself. Grover's eyes went wide across the table at her. She shrugged. Chiron stamped another hoof when they were all done, signaling their move to the amphitheater. They stacked their plates and stood up, heading over. "Oh, we've got a massive one of these back at Camp Jupiter," Hazel said, looking at all the raised stone seats in the stands. As always, her head exploded with questions. What were the supports made of? What was the diameter? What did it have under the stands? She'd been there once but hadn't appreciated it fully. She'd mainly been trying to unite the camps and avoid getting eaten by Reyna's metal dogs at the time. New Rome had been beautiful. It would be nice to maybe build some of their structures at the camp one day. In the distance, the Athena Partheno stood tall and proud. The crashing of the ocean waves behind audible even from there. The dark sea looked restless tonight. She glanced at Percy, who was tapping the undersides of his thighs where he sat, and slid an arm around his waist. He jumped, startled, and she leant back questioningly, silently asking if she should continue. He blinked, then put his own arm around her shoulders, and they relaxed back again. "If the Apollo cabin starts trying to introduce their rapping band again, we're outta here," he murmured into her hair. She snorted softly. Sure enough, a while later a golden-haired boy stepped up to the mic and tapped it once, clearing his throat. His siblings behind him held up their own mics, then they started throwing up gang signs. "Monsters, you stink, you got me on the brink, my sword says no, I'll turn you into dough." She joined in on the booing, pointing her thumb down at the kids who had clearly inherited their father's skill for such things. Grover and Juniper sat in the row below, supplied pinecones for those around them. The kids grinned, ducking the projectiles, and took bows before being gently ushered off the stage by a grimacing Chiron. "Right," he said, "it's getting late now, I think one more act should do it. Is there anyone who wishes to—" He stopped and blinked, staring at something outside the amphitheater. They all craned their heads round. "What is it?" Leo asked. "Can't see," Jason said, hovering out of his seat slightly. Annabeth squinted. It was a man. He was walking across the waves of the ocean and stopped at the edge of the beach, his face just barely lit by the torches of the amphitheater. A handsome man with black hair and green eyes. Oh no. She heard Percy swear quietly as everyone swiveled round to him. "Lord Poseidon," Chiron called out in surprise before bowing his head, "we are honored to have you join us." Poseidon didn't move. "I'm here to talk to my son," he said bluntly before turning round and walking back onto the top of the sea, clearly expecting Percy to follow. "Oh, are you now?" Percy said under his breath. "That sounds like your cue, Prissy," Clara said, jerking her chin. "Off you pop." Annabeth chewed her lip as he stood. She didn't think this was a good idea. Logically, her brain told her that he was Percy's father, had voted to keep him alive, and was probably the least likely god to harm him. Even though Percy had punched him in the face, she hadn't believed Leo entirely at the time. But now it seemed a lot more probable. She still thought he had his best interests in mind. But her heart told her to not let him anywhere near a god alone ever again. She heard him sigh deeply. He stood up, turned, and kissed her on the forehead. "This should be interesting," he muttered. "I'll be back soon, I promise." "Careful, Perce," Grover sounded worried. He quirked up a corner of his mouth as he walked down the stone stairs, everyone staring and muttering. "This might not go so well." Jason looked ready to follow him, and the others echoed his sentiment, half out of their seats. "I know he's his dad and everything, but why does he want him?" asked Leo. 1,000 scenarios flickered through her head as she watched Percy cross the grass onto the beach, and then walk straight onto the water towards his father without missing a beat. It never failed to make the younger demigods ooh and point. "I'm not sure," she said, crossing her fingers under her legs. Chapter 66. Percy XLAI. The black waves under his feet fell dangerously still as Percy walked towards his father. Poseidon stood facing away from him, his arms crossed, seemingly staring up at the hundreds of visible stars glittering in the night sky. Percy looked up too. He wondered if Zeus was watching. "Above anything, I think this proves without doubt that you are definitely my son." Poseidon spoke first, and Percy came to a stop a couple feet away from him. The locusts chirped quietly from the shore. Percy flicked a wary gaze to the inky depths beneath him. I mean, he gestured around him, I'm walking on water, you might be onto something there. This isn't a joke, Percy. Poseidon didn't look at him, his voice was serious. His tentative smile dropped. No, he agreed, it isn't. Silence stretched between them. Poseidon sighed. The sea does not like to be restrained, but I fear there has been too much free rein lately. Anger sparked in Percy's chest, more ripples formed around them. Too much freedom? He asked, unable and unwilling to keep the scathing tone from his voice. You do what you want when you want with who you want. Oh, I'm so sorry for living my own life. Percy, Poseidon cut him off. You act as if you are a god, you have forgotten what it means to be mortal, you don't care anymore, the kindness in you that was once there is getting harder and harder to see. The simmering fury that had overflowed on Olympus crawled through his veins again. I wonder why, he spat. No, Poseidon rubbed a hand over his face and turned round. His father looked tired. Percy, you misunderstand me, there's a reason words do not come easily to us, I don't mean this and I'm saying you were right. Percy pulled a face. What? We too have forgotten what it means to be mortal, to be pushed beyond our limits and be forced to find our way back. It was cruel of us, no matter how we voted, to have put that on you. We see that now. Percy's mouth moved silently for a couple seconds as words evaded him. Oh, he said eventually. Yeah, Poseidon replied. The tide flowed around the two of them without a sound. Percy suspected his father did it on purpose. What about Zeus, he asked, and Athena? Poseidon scratched the back of his neck. Actually, Athena was the one who changed her mind. What? She said that she stood by the threat you pose, but she feared history repeating, that our undoing would be our own fault. Percy tilted his head. She thinks I'll turn into Luke. Poseidon winced. It was along those lines. Wait, Percy held up a hand. So I'm getting a big godly apology because you guys are scared you'll have someone try to overthrow you again, so this isn't actually about us then, it just circles back round to you, he accused. Poseidon's eyes flashed and he turned away from Percy again. You really don't make this as easy as you used to, he laughed humorlessly to himself. You used to be a little challenging when you were younger, sure, but not like this. I bet. The god sighed. I won't lie to you, Percy, this is partly because Athena pointed out the risks of having you openly oppose us. No one liked the idea of that, well, except Ares, but you know what he's like. Sounds about right. But after you left, Poseidon said with emphasis on the word left, everyone got talking again and the general consensus was that we failed you, the others too, but you in particular. You asked us to be better last year and we promised, but we have very little to show for it. Godly-demigodly relations are at a low point again. One of their leaders turned on us, others join him in his disrespect. It does sound familiar, Percy admitted before sighing. It's not that I don't hate you, I don't want to lay siege to Olympus or whatever, I don't want to die bloody, I don't want my friends to die bloody, especially if someone or something could stop it. I know, Poseidon nodded, the truth is that we need you mortals as much as you need us, it is what binds us together, keeps us eternal, and we keep trying to ignore that. They were quiet again. A fish swam by and seemed to do a strange little bob of its head like a bow at the both of them. He heard a warble underwater like it was singing to itself. Percy sighed. I'm sorry I hit you, he said truthfully, even though he barely remembered that horrible day in Epirus. Poseidon turned back around. The sea in his eyes was calm and flowing. I know, he said again, you were a bit unhinged. I could tell that you weren't in your right state of mind. No, Percy mused, I really wasn't. She was dead and I thought it was my fault for a different reason than it actually was, but that's not important and after everything. He gestured helplessly, unable to find the words. Poseidon stepped closer to him so they weren't almost shouting at each other. They watched the horizon for a while before talking. The moon shone brightly on them. Percy, my brothers and I know what demigods believe, but we have actually been down there, you know, in the pit. Really? Percy blinked. Once, Zeus may have gone back another time, I'm not sure. We went to free the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires to fight our father. Oh yeah, Percy said, recalling the story, I remember now. He bit his lip and shoved his hands in the pockets of his suit trousers. He opened his mouth to ask his father something, then thought better of it, but the question knocked around his brain like a ball in a tumble dryer. He couldn't help himself. Did you meet him?" The words tumbled out of his lips unbidden. Poseidon quirked an eyebrow at him. "Meet who?" Percy's heart beat just a little faster. He pretended his palms weren't getting sweaty. "You know him," he tried. His father looked flummoxed. Percy moved his hands uselessly. "The god of the pit," he got out after a beat or two. If the sea was quiet before, it was silent now. They could have been stood in the middle of a pitch-black desert for all he knew. Poseidon was staring at him like Percy had just told him the secrets of the universe. "No," he replied slowly, "no, I didn't." Percy nodded, pressing his lips into a line. He'd told him that he had been the first one to see his physical form in a millennia. It wasn't unrealistic to think that his father might have seen him too. Finally giving in to his urge to move, he began to prod the water underfoot, no doubt spoiling the leather of his shoe, stepping around. His father watched him. Percy didn't look him in the eye when he spoke. He can't come up here, can he? He felt like he was 6 again and asking his mother to check for monsters under his bed and in his closet. He wondered if she'd ever checked for real. "I don't know," Poseidon said carefully, still staring. "Primordial gods mostly stick to their own realms. I don't think he's ever left." That didn't mean he wouldn't. "Oh," Percy nodded as if a massive and ugly weight wasn't shifting over his chest about it. Cool. He kept nodding long after his common sense told him to stop, that his father was very clearly observing him with curious eyes. This is why you can't say the name, isn't it?" Poseidon asked. "You met him." Percy breathed in. "Yeah," he said. "I met him. He was just, and I didn't." He cut himself off, not really knowing how to finish a single coherent sentence about what he'd dealt with. "He was there," he settled on. Poseidon moved closer to him, his hand raising like he was about to put it on Percy's shoulder. It slowed and curled his fingers back, dropping to his side. Percy didn't know how to feel about that. "He frightened you," his father said softly, like he was indeed talking to his 6-year-old son. Percy snorted. It didn't sound as brave and strong as it usually did. "I think he'd frighten anyone," Percy tried to laugh. "Even you guys," he gestured up at the sky. Poseidon tilted his head to the side before shaking it, almost to himself. "Gods do feel fear too, you know, Percy," he spoke in a low voice. "Not often, not a lot. Many of us would say that we've never felt true fear. It could be true, we're immortal. What do we have to lose?" He shrugged, but his face fell serious once more. "But recently I know I did," he confessed quietly. Percy nodded, staring up at the stars once more. "Gaia," he prompted. But Poseidon shook his head. "Maybe a little. It was another great prophecy after all, but hearing about my unarmed son falling into the pit with a broken limb didn't help matters further." Percy looked at him, eye to eye in surprise. "You were scared?" he asked. "For you, yes." Poseidon's hand twitched again. But he used it to gesture around him as he spoke instead. "Percy, you're important to me. When I could no longer feel you on this plane, when I realized that you were alone in that place, I haven't lost a child in a long time." "You haven't had a child in a long time." That got a dry snort from the old god before he looked at Percy again. "I mean it," he said. "I used to have many demigod children all at the same time, hundreds of them running about and going on quests, but they're all gone now. I only have one son left. The others, they don't understand this. While your wording was a little unnecessary, you were right in saying that it doesn't feel the same for them to lose a child when they have many more left. It hurts, yes, but they have the others to comfort themselves with." Percy listened with slightly wide eyes. His father was being truly honest with him, possibly for the first time ever. It was like staring straight into his soul. "But you're all I've got. You're my son," Poseidon said, indicating up and down him with his hand. And I really don't want to see you die bloody either." It wasn't the most poetic of words, but Percy knew what he meant. His throat felt a little clogged, and he turned away. "So why all this?" he asked. "Why the vote? What would you have done if it had gone the other way?" Poseidon winced. "I'm not sure. While the majority vote on the council is law, I'm not sure. Maybe I would have taken a leaf out of your book and done something completely reckless that would somehow pay off." Percy snorted. Poseidon smiled at him. "It always pays off," Percy told him. "It's a patented method." "I'm sure." They smiled at each other before looking away. "Will you be seeing anyone?" Poseidon asked him after a few minutes of the both of them absently making waves in the sea. Percy frowned. Dad, you know Annabeth and I mean like a therapist, Poseidon cut in. Percy blanked. A therapist, he repeated. Poseidon nodded. Dionysus brought it up, said if we were going to keep you around we needed to, well, the wording isn't important, basically help your slightly traumatized brain to heal. Percy didn't doubt that Dionysus had used other words. I'm not traumatized, Percy defended. His father raised his eyebrows. Sometimes it really was like looking into a mirror. Then say his name, he said simply. Percy scowled. Fine, he'd prove it, he'd just not think about it and then say it. His front teeth clacked together, ready to make the T sound. He was a big boy, he knew how to speak. He breathed in and tried to force the word out. No sound came out his mouth. He swallowed, face flushing, and looked away for a beat. He tried again. And again. He couldn't mouth the word, couldn't even say it in his head beyond the first syllable. It was like his throat locked up, his tongue refusing to move. His father watched him with sympathy in his eyes. Percy's face burned. He turned around completely, his body stiff. It's not your fault, he heard Poseidon say quietly over his shoulder. Percy really didn't think it would help to tell him to shut up and pushed it back down. Every time he even so much as thought about the word, it was like the god of the pit was staring straight into his eyes again, with him still shaking with terror, clutching onto that stalactite with bloody nails. He tapped his fingers rapidly against his thighs. Look, it's different, okay, he ended up biting out at him. Just drop it. What was he like? Poseidon asked behind him. Percy felt a flash of rage. I'm not talking about it. Did he hurt you? Stop. Percy whipped around, instinctually throwing a wave at him. It splashed against the god, but a very dry Poseidon came out of it. It probably wasn't the best idea to attack the god of the sea in the sea with the sea, but Percy didn't care. What did he say to you? His father asked, unblinking about the churning water around them. Percy narrowed his eyes and hurled a bigger wave at him. Was that how he wanted to play it? Poseidon split it and walked through it. What did he sound like? Shut up. Wave after wave, question after question, lobbed in each other's direction. Why did he show up? I don't know. What did he want? Stop it, Percy begged. Poseidon evaporated the last wave, stood barely a foot away from him. What color were his eyes? He asked. He didn't have any, Percy remembered in horror, and finally all the water around them dropped with an echoing slap. He didn't have any, it was just he didn't have a face. I don't know how he spoke, but he didn't have a face, Dad, he just didn't have a... Poseidon hugged him and Percy threw his arms around his father, slamming his forehead into his shoulder. He didn't have one, Percy whispered, screwing his eyes shut. It's okay, Poseidon told him softly. He smelled of a salty beach and fresh sea air. His father's hand came up to cup the back of his head, his fingers threaded through the black hair. Percy's oldest memories from when he was a baby stirred once more, a warm glow, a hand on his forehead. Poseidon was a god. He had killed many people for minor offenses. He was older than all the demigods at camp combined. Percy had hit him, had yelled at him, had accused him of many harsh truths. But he was his father, his dad. He was deeply flawed, occasionally murderous, and shifted easily between humor and anger. But like father, like son, right? It isn't that I want you gone, Percy said, his voice muffled in his father's Hawaiian shirt. I just want you to be better because I know you can be. Poseidon's chest shook. Percy realized he was laughing. Isn't that my line? He said. Next mortal parent-teacher conference I'm using that. Percy snorted. Poseidon didn't let go of him, setting his chin on Percy's head. Percy suddenly felt very safe in his father's embrace. He sniffed. Was this why Annabeth liked it when he did it to her? I'm sorry you had to go through that alone, Poseidon said. That I didn't help you when I should have. I'm sorry that I did not help during your childhood. Percy frowned, but Poseidon continued. If your mother had not removed the life of that creature, I would have dragged him to the fields of punishment myself. I checked with Hades after you left. He's there, Poseidon murmured vindictively, stuck in a bath of boiling hot sewage. It is all he can smell and feel for all eternity. Percy snorted, fitting. But I should have intervened the first time he laid a hand on you or your mother. I should have paid more attention to have noticed it in the first place. For that I am truly sorry, and I'm sorry that we still are not treating our children right." Percy nodded against his shoulder. "It's not as hard as you think, Dad," Percy said. "We just need you to be there, help us when we ask properly, just make sure everyone is that they feel loved." His father sounded uncomfortable but said the word strongly. Percy shrugged awkwardly. "Percy, I have told you before that you are my favorite son." Something warmed in Percy's chest. "I remember," he said, "you're my favorite dad." He thought about Paul too late, but Poseidon was already laughing. "I should hope so," the god said, finally stepping away from the hug but keeping a hand on his shoulder. Hestia was right. Hestia. Poseidon shifted slightly where he stood. "She joined in on the discussion once you were gone. My eldest sister does not speak out often, but she made her stance very clear. It didn't help that Hades was in the corner laughing his father frowned in annoyance at his older brother. Well, let's just say he found it amusing. Poseidon flicked his wrist and a bench made of water jumped to the surface behind them. They sat. Percy looked at the stars again. "So no smitting?" he asked. His father grumbled under his breath. "Yes, no smitting," he said firmly before amending, "or at least not without the full support of the council and at least 3 demigods from different parents." Percy blinked. "Really? Athena's idea. Crazy lady comes up with a few good ideas every now and then." An owl cawed indignantly from somewhere back on the shore. Percy and Poseidon shared a look. "I think everyone mostly feels bad after your speech," Poseidon told him. "Yes, there was anger at first, but the names you said kept coming back, of the children that had fallen, and then their respective parents kept getting a little quieter. I don't think we had really realized just how many we had lost in these last few years alone, not to mention our Roman counterparts. We tried to keep them safe," Percy said. Staring at his hands, "All of them. I didn't want to use them as examples because they shouldn't be." "I know." A dolphin jumped out the water a couple yards in front of them doing an elaborate flip. Percy whistled. "Not bad," he said. "Oh, broke him out of SeaWorld a couple months ago. He hasn't left me alone since. Keeps talking about honor or something, I don't know." It did another backflip out the water, and Percy clapped politely. "Don't encourage him," his father warned him. 10 points, Percy shouted at the dolphin, who poked his head up out the water, jaw falling open in a big grin. "Thanks, mate," the dolphin replied with an Australian accent. "Hey, what's the water like in the Red Sea right now?" Poseidon asked the dolphin. "I'll go find out," he cried, splashing away. Percy looked at his father. "What?" Poseidon held up his hands. Percy shook his head but grinned all the same. It faded after a minute. "What about Zeus?" he asked him quietly. A gentle rumble of thunder rolled overhead. Poseidon breathed in then sighed. "My little brother is a younger sibling," Poseidon summarized. "Doesn't take criticism nicely, well-intended or not. Your uncle will need time. He acknowledges the good you have done for the world but doesn't forget the threat you theoretically pose to it as well. Give him time to cool off and he'll come around." Percy looked at him. "And if a random accident was to suddenly happen to me?" Poseidon's fists clenched. "It would have to go through me." Percy observed his father. "You would have done the right thing," Percy told him softly. "What?" his father asked, turning his head towards him. "If the council voted the other way," he said, "you would have done the right thing. You said you didn't know." Poseidon stared, then he gave him a small smile. "You remind me so much of your mother," he said, staring out to sea fondly. "She was always seeing the good in people too, even when it wasn't there." Percy tried to smile but couldn't. It was something he kept thinking about. Do you think she'd see it in me too?" he asked quietly, "now after everything. What if Achilles was right? What if he got home and his mother barely recognized him? He hadn't seen her in months and months. What if she didn't want him back, or wanted the old him back?" He chewed his lip. Poseidon reached out and gripped his shoulder, his eyes alive with storms. "Percy," he said, "never for 1 second, not even after you struck me and Shadow traveled to the underworld, have I ever thought you had lost what made you you." Percy swallowed. "I nearly did," he said. I nearly lost myself completely. Down there I just kept doing the first things that came into my head, and at first it wasn't too bad, but then my first instincts kept changing. Kill first, ask questions later, I didn't even care, it didn't bother me, it still doesn't, not really. Poseidon nodded, and Percy truly thought he understood. If it wasn't for Annabeth, Dad, I don't know what I would have done. You would have done the right thing, his father echoed his own words back at him. Percy wasn't sure. Maybe you just don't get to know, Poseidon shrugged. The fates are annoying that way, better to just look ahead rather than back. There's an old phrase, I'm not sure about the origin, but it's, this too shall pass. He squeezed his shoulder lightly. For an immortal, time passes in the blink of an eye. We are always reminded that things are rarely permanent. It is why we can be so careless at times, but mortals often need reminders. Things won't be bad forever, Percy. They won't be good forever either, but that just gets boring after a while. You have to know that this will pass. One day you'll wake up and it just won't be a problem anymore. Percy stared at his father. That actually really helped. The idea that one day this would all be a memory, a story, one that would make him wrinkle his nose but carry on with his day. That's not bad advice, he told him. Maybe you should be the therapist. Poseidon snorted. I highly doubt I'm the best option for a job like that. I'm still trying to get Triton to be self-sufficient. Percy snorted too. Good luck. Percy breathed in then out. Things being okay sounds pretty good, he said absently. Yeah. They sat quietly. A shooting star danced through the night sky above them, and Percy didn't feel so jumpy about being on the open water anymore with his father sat next to him. It was their domain. He needed to spend some time back in it after all this. Get used to it again. I think your friends are waiting for you near the beach, Poseidon told him. Percy turned around, squinting his eyes. They were quite away from the shore, but he could vaguely see some human-shaped shadows sat by the trees, lit by a couple flickering golden torches. He didn't like the look of them sat out there all exposed while he was far away. I should get back. He didn't want to say it, wanted to let this peaceful moment stretch on as long as possible, but he knew he had to. He looked at his father. Thanks, Dad, for everything. Poseidon inclined his head. Thank you, he said. You're still a good kid, Percy. I am prouder of you now than I have ever been before. I did not lie when I said that the life of a hero is never easy and their fates are always tricky, but with you, I find that I'm not so worried anymore. I pity the poor creature that tries to take away your happy ending, my son. Percy smiled at him, and his father returned it. They stood up and the bench flooded back under the surface. Percy breathed in. Oh, and next time you're at Olympus, Poseidon winked at him. Watch your language, don't make me tell your mother. Percy winced but laughed. No promises, he said. Poseidon held his arm out. Percy grasped his forearm and his father squeezed his. It felt like respect. It felt like a new beginning, one he'd be happy to enforce. The god of the sea nodded once at him, and Percy nodded back, then let go and walked back towards camp. When he glanced back over his shoulder, his father was gone, the waves rippling serenely under the night sky. He smiled once to himself, a small smile that only he would see, then kept walking. Sure enough, the others were waiting for him on the shore. Percy, Annabeth hurried towards him. She still looked beautiful in her dress. He smiled at her. Hey, he said simply. Don't hey me, how did it go? She demanded. He gazed at her fondly. She was amazing. It's okay, he said. Everything's going to be okay. She evaluated him with pretty gray eyes. Are you sure? Asked Piper worriedly. It looked like you two were fighting for a bit there. Percy shrugged. Just had a few things to get off our chests. He took Annabeth's hand and squeezed it. He apologized. The others blinked. What? Asked Grover. He nodded. Full apology. They're going to try harder with their kids. None of us get smited, and I think Athena might be on my side now. Annabeth's face lit up. Really? She asked. Oh gods, that's good. Things might have been awkward in the future if she still didn't trust you. Personally, Percy still suspected she didn't, and he could see that Annabeth didn't truly believe it either, but with the cool night air around them, shouts and laughs of the campers behind them and his hand in hers, neither of them were going to question it. He rubbed a thumb over her cheek and kissed her. I think that's our cue to skedaddle, Leo whispered loudly after a couple seconds. It is, Annabeth said once they'd parted. We'll see you all tomorrow. Knights, the others all called out, grinning at them. Knights, they called back tiredly. Once their friends had trampled back through the trees and out of sight, Percy turned back to Annabeth. About that future, he said. Annabeth stood on her tiptoes, wrapping her arms round his head to kiss him again. Percy smiled in the kiss and felt her do the same. We've got the rest of our lives to think about that, Annabeth told him after. True, he looked at her out the corner of his eye. You've already got us on a 10-year schedule, haven't you? That's nobody's business, she murmured, but he saw her eyes shining. He knew she was always wary that people would leave her. If he had his way, he never would. Percy laughed. It sure is, he kissed her on the forehead. Nobody. Hand in hand, they headed back to the cabins. Percy was nearly a legal adult, but he still wasn't sure if the threat of the cleaning harpies catching them out late and eating them was real or not. At this point, he was too unsure to ask. They went round the backs of all the buildings, ducking in at the end to go into cabin 3 to avoid being seen. It was cabin 3 or cabin 6, and Percy thought he'd rather face the harpies than an entire room of Annabeth's siblings all watching them at the same time. His room had miraculously survived the war. Oh, die immortals, Annabeth said once they were inside, throwing up her hands in exasperation. After all that time on the Argo 2, I'd honestly forgotten your cabin had bunks too. Percy snorted, which set her off in turn as they looked at the 6 bunks standing in a row in his cabin. He flicked one of the lamps on but angled the lampshade away so the light was dim, enough to see and enough to sleep. Top or bottom bunk, he asked her with a grin. He placed Riptide on the stand next to his usual bed and began to fumble with his cufflinks. Taking off a suit was more difficult than it looked, especially considering he hadn't really put it on in the first place. Obviously the bottom bunk, she said, also beginning to slide the gold bracelets off her arms. Best place to be in a fire, first to know, first to go. Oh, Percy conceded, I guess I just used to think I'd forget and fall out if I was on the top bunk. That too, she nodded, effortlessly pulling down the zip at the back of her dress herself. But for tonight, until I fix this, you're just gonna have to budge up, buddy. You ask the world of me, he said, kicking his shoes into the corner of his cabin and finally pulling off his shirt. Get used to it, Annabeth replied, but she sounded a little more distant and dreamier than usual. Percy grinned and flexed his bare arms. Miss Chase, he asked, something wrong? She grinned back, not at all, Mr. Jackson, merely enjoying the view. She gestured out the ajar window. The stars are bright tonight. Quite. He kicked his trousers into the corner of the room too, then pulled the window shut and locked it. Then he repeated it with the door. Nothing was getting in. Mid-stride he looked down. Had Aphrodite changed his boxers, he'd never owned a red pair before unless his 10-year-old Spider-Man boxers were to be counted. He'd like to think they were. His bunk bed was slightly dusty, but Percy didn't care. He'd slept once since leaving the pit, and after sleeping on rocks on Drakens and on cold cell floors, it was now always a blessing to sleep in an actual bed. He patted the sheets down and threw back the duvet, taking the left half of the bed. It was less than a half, much less, he didn't care. Annabeth threw her dress into the corner too and slid into her half-third, fourth of the bed. She twisted and shoved, making him tilt his head to avoid being brained by a stray elbow until her head was resting in the divot between his head and his shoulder. Her skin was warm. There was clearly not enough room for the both of them, but Percy didn't care in the slightest. She clearly didn't either. So this is it, huh? Annabeth murmured. What? He asked, flipping the duvet over the both of them. End of the quest, she said. End of another great prophecy. Oh, he said, well, yeah. Good riddance, she yawned. I got stabbed in the last one, and even I have to admit the other was better. Percy exhaled through his nose in amusement, slightly ruffling the golden hairs on her head. At least it's over, he reasoned, no more. You say that now? She replied, and he saw her eyes slide shut as she burrowed into him more. Her hands were slightly cold against the skin of his chest. Wait until Rachel kicks down our door in a week or so, talking about the lone son of the sea god or wisdom's daughter. Percy groaned. Don't we'd leave. Oh, instantly, Annabeth said without hesitation, I'm just saying. Please don't, he said, before reaching up to push a stray lock of her hair off his face. Maybe it'll be a nice one though, Annabeth said. How about the son of Poseidon and the daughter of Athena have a nice day? No good, he told her gently, doesn't rhyme. They have a nice day, hooray, she tried. You're on thin ice. You do better. He cursed internally and ran through the alphabet in his head for rhyming words. Okay, he said, how about they have a nice day, they swim in the bay. Annabeth shifted in his arms. She said, maybe not. Despite feeling half asleep, Percy realized his mistake. If you want to, that is, we'll go slow, I'll make sure there's no one and nothing but us in a mile radius. Annabeth yawned again. That sounds better, she said, maybe next week. It's a date, Percy murmured into her hair. It took a beat or two for her to respond. You wish, Jackson, came her sleepy reply. His eyes still closed, he smiled. With a free hand, he prodded his pillow around until he felt a bit of the cool side on his cheek and sank down onto it. Annabeth's steady breathing tickled his neck. The cabin was dark, but the lamp kept the shadows away. He'd need to request a double bed from Chiron, but had no idea how he was going to look the centaur in the eye while asking. On second thought, he considered he'd make Annabeth do it. She had him wrapped round her little finger. Back problems, he could hear her saying casually with a little shrug in his head. He pulled the duvet up over his exposed shoulder, briefly cracking open an eye to check Riptide was still on his bedside drawer. Should he keep hold of it? He didn't like it so far away. His hand slid out under the covers and slid the pen under his pillow. Yeah, that was good. He absently kissed Annabeth on the top of her head, and she clearly wasn't as asleep as he had thought, because she returned it instantly to his shoulder. Feeling true peace for the first time in a long time, Percy closed his eyes and let exhaustion envelop him. It felt like drifting away on a small raft out at sea. He breathed out. Oh, this is incredible, Koyo said. No, I take it back, this is my favorite one yet.